This time, the Shen family would not become her shield. The moment the poisoned wine burned down my throat, I could hear the snow falling heavily beyond the walls of the desolate courtyard. Xiao Jing'an did not come to see me. Liu Zhiwei did. Wrapped in a snow-white fox fur cloak, she stood outside the broken threshold looking as elegant and fragile as she had always appeared in everyone else's eyes. Yet the way she looked at me was as if I were nothing more than a worm waiting to be crushed. She bent down and smiled softly. Shen Mingtang, do you know why you lost? I lay on the icy floor, blood churning in my throat and chest. I could not even move my fingertips. Because you were too stupid, she said. Your father is the Grand Tutor, your elder brother serves in the Ministry of Justice, and your mother controls the Shen household. You were born with more powerful supporters than anyone could ask for, yet you insisted on rules, dignity and hard work. You pleaded for me and persuaded your father to accept me as his disciple. You endured Xiao Jing'an protecting me. You watched me take everything from you, one thing at a time, yet you still believed that if you were virtuous enough, he would eventually turn back to you. Her smile deepened and her voice dropped to a hiss. What a pity. Did he ever turn back? My vision darkened in waves. I saw father's disappointed eyes before he was sent into exile. I saw the blackened blood across my brother's chest when his body was returned to the Shen residence after he was attacked while investigating a case. I saw mother gripping my hand on her sickbed, unable even to finish calling my name before she died. And then there was me. I had been imprisoned in a cold courtyard of the Marquis's residence for 3 years. What awaited me was not my husband's change of heart, but a cup of poisoned wine. Liu Zhiwei leaned closer and drew a warm jade pendant from her sleeve, holding it beside my ear. The Shen family's heart-revealing jade truly is a remarkable treasure, she whispered. It's a shame you never learned how to use it, even by the time you died. She recited an incantation I had never heard before. The heart conceals nothing. Hidden thoughts reveal themselves. At that instant, a faint wind seemed to stir inside the room. Her spoken voice overlapped with another voice sharp, triumphant, and unmistakably her own thought. Shen Mingtang, every last member of the Shen family was born to pave my road. A violent pain surged through my chest. I died on that winter night, amid Liu Zhiwei's laughter. When I opened my eyes again, there was no snow outside the window. Instead, a spring rain rattled against the green roof tiles, just as it had on that day in my previous life. The day Liu Zhiwei knelt outside the Shen residence, repeatedly striking her forehead against the stone steps. My lady, wake up! My personal maid, Fu Shuang, was calling softly beside the bed. I jerked my eyes open. My chest rose and fell violently, and my fingers clenched the brocade quilt. This was not the desolate courtyard. There was no poisoned wine. There was no ruined room that never saw daylight. Before me was Tangli Courtyard, where I had lived before marriage. The folding screen was embroidered with crabapple blossoms Mother had drawn herself. Calming incense still burned in the bronze censer on the table. A freshly cut branch of pear blossoms stood in the white porcelain vase by the window. Fu Shuang saw how pale I was and hurriedly reached out to touch my forehead. My lady, did you have a nightmare? Miss Liu is still kneeling outside the residence. Master has asked you to go to the front hall. He said Xiao is here as well. Miss Liu. Xiao cold spread through every inch of my body. Heaven had truly granted me another chance. Today was the day Liu Zhiwei begged my father to accept her as his disciple. In my previous life she had worn an old plain dress and knelt outside the Shen residence from early morning until the afternoon. She said the Liu family had fallen. Her father had been falsely accused, and she had no one to rely on. She asked only that my father take her as a disciple and give her a chance to study and establish herself. At the time I had not yet learned how treacherous people could be. I pitied her as an orphaned young woman, and because she and Xiao Jing'an had grown up together, I spoke on her behalf before father. Father, why not let Miss Liu stay and study for a few days? That single sentence allowed her to cross the Shen family's threshold. That same sentence also pushed the Shen family step by step into the abyss. After becoming father's disciple, Liu Zhiwei used the reputation of being the Grand Tutor's student to enter and leave the Shen residence freely. She stole father's manuscripts, appropriated the posthumous work of a poor female scholar, and used the Shen family's reputation to make herself famous throughout the capital. Later, she secretly formed ties with the third prince's household and forged father's student register, framing the Shen family for forming a political faction. Father was exiled. My brother was attacked while investigating the case. Mother died from the shock. I was confined by Xiao Jing'an in a cold courtyard of the Marquis's residence, and 3 years later a cup of poisoned wine ended my life. At the thought of it, I suddenly laughed. Fu Shuang looked even more frightened. My lady? I threw back the quilt and got out of bed. What time is it? Just past the hour of the serpent. There was still time at this hour in my previous life. Liu Zhiwei had already been kneeling outside the gate for 2 hours. Xiao Jing'an had arrived in the front hall and was pleading for her. In another half hour I would be summoned there. 1 incense stick later I would see blood on her forehead. Then I would soften, speak for her, and personally let her enter the Shen family. Not in this life. I put on my outer robe and said steadily, Fushuang, go to the ancestral hall. She froze. My lady master asked you to go to the front hall. Why are we going to the ancestral hall first? To retrieve something. I paused and looked at the young but pallid face reflected in the bronze mirror. Something that can expose a wolf in sheep's clothing. The ancestral hall was cool and quiet with only a faint scent of incense. I knelt before the ancestral tablets and kowtowed 3 times. Then I opened the sandalwood case hidden behind the offering table and took out the jade. It was smooth and warm with a faint red vein at its center like a suspended drop of blood. The moment my fingertip touched it, pain stabbed through my chest. In that cold courtyard in my previous life, Liu Zhiwei had held this very jade while mocking me, word by word, for being a fool. I closed my eyes and softly recited the incantation. The heart conceals nothing. Hidden thoughts reveal themselves. The red vein inside the jade gave a faint flash, then quickly dimmed. Fushuang gasped and stumbled back half a step. My lady, this jade. I closed my hand around the heart-revealing jade. No one is to hear of what happened here today. Fushuang immediately dropped to her knees. Understood, my lady. The spring rain grew heavier. Before I had even entered the front hall, I heard Xiao Jing'an's voice. Uncle Shen, Zhiwei is alone and has no one to depend on. She only wants an opportunity to study. Her father may have been involved in an old case, but a child should not bear a parent's guilt. You have always valued talent. Are you truly going to watch her kneel to death outside the Shen residence? I had listened to that voice for far too many years in my previous life. Later, whenever Liu Zhiwei felt wronged, he would question me in the same tone. Zhiwei has no one to rely on. Why must you be so aggressive? Zhiwei only wants to stay in the Marquis's residence. Why can't you be more generous? Shen Mingtong, you are the legitimate daughter of the Grand Tutor. Why lower yourself by quarreling with an orphaned girl? Again and again, he demanded generosity and accused me of pettiness until everyone in the capital called me a jealous shrew. Hearing him now, I found it only ridiculous. I stepped into the front hall. Father sat in the seat of honor, his brow slightly furrowed. Mother sat beside him, worry on her face. My elder brother Shen Yanzi stood near the folding screen with a case file from the Ministry of Justice still in his hand. He had clearly rushed home from the government office. Xiao Jing'an stood in the middle of the hall, dressed in a moon-white robe. His features were still as handsome and refined as I remembered, though impatience shadowed his eyes. The first thing he said when he saw me was, Mingtang, you came at the right time. You and Zhiwei are acquainted. Speak for her. In my previous life, I had done exactly that, and paid for it with my entire family. This time I did not even look at him. I went straight to Father and bowed. Father, I am late. Father looked up at me. Miss Liu is kneeling outside the gate, asking to enter my tutelage. This matter is also connected to your engagement, so I called you here to hear your thoughts. I understand? Xiao Jing'an visibly relaxed, certain that I would support him. I turned toward the entrance. When Liu Zhiwei was helped inside by a maidservant, her plain skirt was soaked through, her face was bloodless, and there was indeed a small wound on her forehead. She knelt before the hall, swaying as if she might collapse at any moment. Tears fell at precisely the right time. Sir, I dare not ask for much. I only beg you to recognize my sincere desire to learn. If I may enter your tutelage, I would willingly sweep floors and grind ink. In my previous life, those words had broken my heart. Now every syllable seemed to reek of blood. I walked slowly toward her. The heart-revealing jade was hidden beneath my sleeve, growing warm against my palm. Liu Zhiwei looked up at me with tears in her eyes. Sister Shen, I know you dislike the affection that has existed between Brother Jing'an and me since childhood, but I came to the Shen residence today, only to study. I have no other intentions. Xiao Jing'an immediately frowned. Zhiwei, you don't need to humiliate yourself like this. I looked down at her. Miss Liu, you say you have no other intentions. You asked to become my father's disciple only so you may study and establish yourself. Is that right? Yes. You will not use the Shen family's reputation to attach yourself to the Marquis's household? I will not. You will not steal the Shen family's manuscripts, and you will certainly not harm my father or brother? Liu Zhiwei's expression stiffened slightly. Xiao Jing'an said sharply, Shen Mingtong, those accusations are too serious. I ignored him and continued staring at Liu Zhiwei. Do you dare say it again? She bit her lip, appearing deeply wounded by my pressure. I dare swear on my late father's name. Every word of what I seek today comes from my true heart. At last I smiled. I pressed the heart-revealing jade beneath my sleeve. The heart conceals nothing. Hidden thoughts reveal themselves. The jade abruptly grew hot. A clear gust seemed to sweep through the hall. Liu Zhiwei still knelt on the floor, tears clinging to her cheeks, but a sharp, triumphant voice suddenly sounded with perfect clarity beside everyone's ears. Of course it comes from my true heart. I truly want to become Shen Huaijin's disciple. I truly want to use the Shen family's reputation to reverse my fortunes, and I truly want that fool Shen Mingtang to step aside for me. The entire hall fell silent, the tears on Liu Zhiwei's face froze. I lowered my eyes to her and asked one deliberate word at a time, Miss Liu, is that also what lies in your true heart? For a moment, even the rain seemed to stop. Father's teacup hung suspended in midair. Mother clenched her handkerchief. Shenyanzi stepped away from the folding screen, his gaze sharp as a drawn blade. Xiao Jing'an's face changed as well. Only Liu Zhiwei appeared not to understand what had happened. Still kneeling, eyes brimming with tears, she trembled and asked, Sister Shen, what did you just say? Her voice remained soft and innocent, but the expressions of everyone in the hall had changed beyond recovery. The heart-revealing jade was still hot beneath my sleeve. I knew it would not work continuously. In my previous life, Liu Zhiwei had explained that it could reveal only a fleeting hidden thought when someone's emotions surged violently to make it respond again. I had to keep provoking her, so I could not rush. I needed her to leap into the trap herself. I stepped back half a pace. I said nothing unusual. I merely asked whether what you just said was truly sincere. Liu Zhiwei's face went pale. I do not understand what Sister Shen means. Xiao Jing'an's brow nodded. He had clearly heard the voice too, but refused to believe it. Who was playing tricks just now? My brother gave him a cold glance. Herr Xiao, do you think the Shen family's front hall is hiding an entire troupe of performers? Xiao Jing'an choked on his reply. Liu Zhiwei quickly recovered and let her tears fall even faster. Sir, madam, I do not know what is happening. If Sister Shen resents me for seeking a teacher, then I will leave. Why use such a method to humiliate me? As she spoke, her body swayed as though she might faint. She had done the same in my previous life. Whenever she made a mistake, she only had to cry, kneel, and collapse. Everyone's attention would shift from what she had done to whether someone else was being too harsh. I did not reach out to support her. Neither did Mother. Father set his teacup down heavily. Miss Liu, I heard that voice as well. Liu Zhiwei's shoulders stiffened. Father was a scholar who valued integrity and upright conduct above all. Else he rarely raised his voice or spoke harshly to anyone. Yet as he looked at Liu Zhiwei now, coldness had already entered his eyes. If you truly harbor no other intentions, then explain yourself clearly. Liu Zhiwei hurriedly countered, Sir, please judge fairly. I bear absolutely no ill will toward the Shen family. I merely admire your learning. If I could receive your guidance, I would die without regret. The heart-revealing jade warmed again. I lowered my eyes and pressed my fingers against it beneath my sleeve. Liu Zhiwei's suppressed thoughts burst out once more. Die without regret. I have no intention of dying. Once I enter the Shen school, I will be the Grand Tutor's disciple. Who in the capital would dare bring up the Liu family's old case again? What is Shen Mingtang besides a woman born lucky enough to have the Grand Tutor as her father? Once I use the Shen family to make a name for myself, Brother Jing'an will eventually understand which of us deserves to stand beside him. Mother's face turned completely white, anger surged in Father's eyes. Xiao Jing'an stared at Liu Zhiwei as though he had been slapped before everyone. Liu Zhiwei looked up in terror. No, I never thought that. She nearly threw herself at Father's feet. Sir, someone is framing me. Someone must be framing me. I finally spoke. Miss Liu, who could possibly frame you by exposing the thoughts inside your own heart? She snapped her gaze toward me. For a fleeting instant, the fragility in her eyes shattered, revealing bitter malice. Then she quickly bowed her head and cried even more pitifully. Sister Shen, I know you mind that Brother Jing'an and I have known each other since childhood. But I have never wished to compete with you. You are the Grand Tutor's legitimate daughter, and the future wife of the heir to the Marquis' residence. I am only an orphan girl. How would I dare contend with you? Xiao Jing'an seized on her words as though they offered him an escape. Mingtang, what happened today is indeed strange. I know Jiwei's nature. Since childhood, she has been too kind even to step on an ant. How could she harbor thoughts like those? I looked at him during my 3 years in the cold courtyard. He had said the same thing again and again. Jiwei was kind-hearted. Zhiwei would never harm anyone. Yet that kind-hearted Liu Zhiwei had stolen Father's manuscripts, caused Lu Qingheng's death, caused my brother to die on his journey back to the capital, and personally delivered poisoned wine to me. I asked, Here Xiao, how many years have you known her? More than 10. And how many years have you known me? He paused. We have been engaged for 5 years. When we were young, our two families had been close. Once when he came to the Shen residence with the Marchioness, I met him beneath the flowering crabapple tree. Later he gave me an inkstone and I returned the gesture with a hand-copied volume of the classics. Those small memories had once seemed precious to me. Now they felt no sturdier than a sheet of thin paper, I said calmly. Because you have known her for more than 10 years, you believe she cannot hurt anyone. Yet after knowing me for 5 years, you immediately believe I am the one harming her today. Xiao Jing'an's expression darkened. That is not what I mean. Then what do you mean? He fell silent for a moment before lowering his voice. Mingtang, Zhiwei has already suffered enough. Her father was ruined, her family collapsed, and all she asks for now is a place where she can stand on her own. Why must you speak so mercilessly? I laughed softly. So being pitiful gives someone the right to scheme against another person's entire family? Shen Mingtang. Xiao Jing'an snapped. Enough. Father's voice not loud, but it silenced the entire hall. He looked at Liu Zhiwei. Your father Liu Zheng was demoted for corruption. The case file remains at the Ministry of Justice. You came here today claiming that he was falsely accused and asking me to accept you as a disciple, so that the Liu family might clear its name. Liu Zhiwei's face changed slightly. Father continued. Yet, what you truly seek is not justice for your father. You intend to use the Shen family's reputation to conceal his crimes. Liu Zhiwei wept. Sir, those were not my thoughts. Someone must be using sorcery against me. Sorcery? My brother laughed coldly and placed the case file in his hand on the table. Miss Liu repeatedly claims her father was wronged, but the Ministry of Justice's records state that when Liu Zheng served as assistant prefect of Jiangzhou, he embezzled 13,000 taels of disaster relief silver. More than 200 people starved to death in the northern villages of Jiangzhou. When the case was uncovered, the witnesses, physical evidence, account books, and bank drafts were all complete. Where exactly is this injustice you speak of? All color drained from Liu Zhiwei's face. Xiao Jing'an had clearly never known any of this. He turned sharply toward her. Zhiwei? Her lips trembled. Brother Jing'an, I was young then. I did not understand any of it. I only knew that father kept saying he had been wronged before he died. The heart-revealing jade heated once more. Of course I cannot admit it. Father only took some silver. Why should the entire Liu family be condemned forever? Are the lives of those peasants really more important than my future? As long as Shen Huaijin agrees to accept me as his disciple, the Liu family's reputation can be cleansed little by little. This time, even Xiao Jing'an stepped backward. For the first time, a crack appeared in the way he looked at Liu Zhiwei. She hurriedly reached for his sleeve. Brother Jing'an, believe me, I truly do not think that way. He did not immediately help her up. Watching them, I felt no light-hearted satisfaction, only coldness. In my previous life, I had lost my entire family because of people like them. Now Liu Zhiwei merely revealed a fragment of her true nature, and everyone was already stunned. But I knew this was not enough. A woman like Liu Zhiwei would never resign herself to defeat after a single failure. She would put on another face, seek another patron, and return. I turned to father and knelt solemnly. Father, regarding Miss Liu's request to become your disciple, I have 3 points to make. Father looked at me, complicated emotions in his eyes. Speak. First, the Shan school must not accept someone whose intentions are so corrupt. Second, the Liu family's old case involved stolen disaster relief funds and cannot be dismissed merely with the phrase falsely accused. Third, since heir Xiao has chosen to vouch for Miss Liu today, then the Xiao family may take responsibility for caring for her. The Shen family will neither interfere nor bear another household's infamy. Xiao Jing'an's expression changed abruptly. Mingtang, what do you mean by that? I raised my eyes to him. I mean that Miss Li was brought here by you and vouched for by you, so naturally she should leave with you. The Shen residence is not a charity hall, and my father is not a ladder anyone may climb simply because they wish to reach the clouds. Surprise flashed in mother's eyes, but she did not stop me. My brother's lips curved almost imperceptibly. Father remained silent for a long time before finally saying, Miss Liu, the Shen family will not accept you as a disciple. Liu Zhiwei went limp and nearly collapsed onto the floor. Father then turned to Xiao Jin. Here Xiao, I do not blame you for remembering an old friendship and acting on Miss Liu's behalf today, but the Shen family has a clean reputation. We will not allow anyone to exploit our compassion. Xiao Jing'an's face alternated between red and white. He wanted to argue, but under father's gaze, he could not force out a word. In the end, he could only help Liu Zhiwei to her feet. As she passed me, tears still clung to her face, and her voice was as thin as a breaking thread. Sister Shen, I will remember today's humiliation. The lingering warmth of the heart-revealing jade had not yet faded beneath my sleeve. I replied softly, remember it well, there will be many more days like this. After Liu Zhiwei left the Shen residence, Xiao Jing'an personally escorted her to Jing'an Marquis Manor. At dusk, a young servant came to report that the Marchioness had already ordered a guest courtyard prepared for her. The household had also begun spreading word outside that the Shen family had behaved without compassion. Fu Shuang's face flushed with anger. My lady, how can they say such things? I sat by the window, looking at the sky clearing after the rain. Jing'an Marquis Manor. Only after I married into that household in my previous life did I learn that its imposing appearance concealed a crumbling interior. The old marquis was sickly, the Marchioness cared obsessively about appearances, and the household accounts were deeply in deficit. Yet they still insisted on maintaining an extravagant noble facade. They wanted the Shen family's clean reputation, and they wanted the Shen family's dowry. Xiao Jing'an protected Liu Zhiwei not merely because of childhood affection. He wanted to have it both ways. Unfortunately for him, I would not take part in his performance in this life. I placed the heart-revealing jade back into its case and said clearly, Fu Shuang, find the marriage agreement between the Jing'an Mark household and our family. She stared at me. My lady, what are you planning? I looked into my own eyes in the bronze mirror. To end the engagement, early the next morning, someone from the Jing'an Marquis household arrived. It was not a matchmaker but Nanny Chen, a senior servant serving the Marchioness. She stood in the Shen family's front hall, her face darker than the sky after a storm. Madam Shen, strictly speaking, our two families are connected by marriage, so there are certain things I should not say. However, yesterday's affair became truly ugly. Miss Liu is an orphan who merely asked the grand tutor to accept her as a disciple. Why did Miss Shen have to drive her so far in public? Mother sat in the main seat, her expression calm. In the past, Mother had placed great importance on maintaining appearances. Faced with such words, she would normally have offered several explanations. Today she only raised her eyes. Nanny Chen, what a strange accusation. Miss Li sought my husband's tutelage. Whether he accepts her is a matter for the Shen family. How has the Marquis household turned this into a claim that my daughter persecuted her? Nanny Chen was momentarily speechless. Standing behind the folding screen, I felt warmth spread through my fingertips. Mother had changed, or perhaps she had always been willing to protect me in my previous life. But I had constantly told her everything was fine. I had always asked her not to make things difficult. I had locked myself inside the cage of the Marquis' household, and refused to let my family see how I suffered. In this life, I would no longer say I was fine, and Mother would no longer endure insults in silence. Nanny Chen quickly continued. The Marchioness merely feels sorry for Miss Liu. After returning yesterday, Miss Liu developed a high fever and kept crying that Miss Shen would not forgive her. The heir watched over her all night and is deeply worried. That is why the Marchioness sent me to ask whether Miss Shen might visit the Marquis' residence and speak openly with Miss Liu. Speak openly? Mother sneered. You want my daughter to go to the Marquis' residence and bow her head to a woman who schemed against the Shen's family? Nanny Chen's expression changed. Madam Miss Liu has an old connection with the heir. After Miss Shen marries into the residence, they will see each other every day. Why make their relationship irreparably hostile? At last, I stepped out from behind the folding screen. Nanny Chen makes an excellent point. Seeing me, she immediately restrained some of her arrogance. Miss Shen. I sat beside Mother and smiled. Since the Marquis' household believes that Miss Li will suffer because she and I must see each other every day after my marriage, then this engagement truly should be reconsidered. Nanny Chen froze. Miss Shen, what do you mean? I looked toward Fu Shuang. She carried forward a sandalwood box and placed it on the table. When she opened it, the marriage contract, the jade pendant Xiao Jing'an had once given me, and every engagement token sent by the Marquis' household lay neatly arranged inside. The blood drained from Nanny Chen's face. I picked up the jade pendant. In my previous life, I had worn it close to my body for years. When Xiao Jing'an gave it to me, he had said, Mingtang, may our two families enjoy a century of harmony. Later, after Liu Zhiwei moved into the Marquis' residence, he personally smashed another jade hairpin of mine, simply because she said it reminded her that she had no family to depend on. Looking at the pendant, now I found it astonishingly cheap. Nanny Chen, return and tell the Marchioness to bring a matchmaker to the Shen residence this afternoon. We will return every engagement gift and cancel the marriage agreement face to face. Nanny Chen finally panicked. Miss Shen, marriage is a serious matter, not a child's game. The heir merely pities someone from his past as his future wife. You should be generous. I lifted my eyes toward her, generous. I had heard that word far too often in my previous life. The Marchioness demanded generosity. Xiao Jing'an demanded generosity. Liu Zhiwei wept and begged me to be generous. Everyone in the capital said the Grand Tutor's legitimate daughter should have room in her heart for others. But what they called generosity meant that I should surrender my husband, surrender my reputation, surrender the Shen family, and in the end, surrender even my life. I placed the pendant back into the box. Nanny Chen of Shen Mingtang, am not a bodhisattva in a temple. I will not cut flesh from my own body simply because someone kneels before me. Since Liu Zhiwei is someone the Marquis's household wishes to save, then your household may practice its own generosity. There is no need to drag the Shen family down with you. Nanny Chen's lips trembled. Mother said indifferently, show her out. Nanny Chen's expression was ghastly as the servants escorted her away. She had barely left when my brother entered from outside. He still wore his Ministry of Justice uniform, and the dust of travel clung to him. Xiao Jing'an is outside the gate. Mother's face darkened. I was not surprised.
Let him in.
A moment later, Xiao Jing'an strode into the front hall. He had clearly rushed over, and anger pressed between his brows. Shen Mingtang, you intend to end our engagement? I looked at him calmly. Yes. He seemed unprepared for such a direct answer and actually froze. What happened yesterday was merely a misunderstanding. Zhiwei was frightened and is still ill. Why must you take matters as far as breaking the engagement? I lifted my teacup and gently blew aside the foam. She is ill, so I must compensate her with my marriage? His expression stiffened. You know that is not what I mean. Then what do you mean? He drew a deep breath, seemingly forcing down his anger. Mingtang, Zhiwei and I have known each other since childhood. Her family has fallen, and she has no relatives in the capital. I cannot abandon her, but you and I are engaged. You alone will be the future wife of the heir to the Marquis's residence. Why must you be so petty? Suddenly, I pitied the woman I had been in my previous life. I had listened to words like these for years. Xiao Jing'an believed that by giving me the position of lawful wife, I owed him gratitude. He gave his concern to Liu Zhiwei, his trust to Liu Zhiwei, and his tenderness to Liu Zhiwei. Then he tossed me the empty shell of the title wife of the heir, and believed he had treated me generously. I set down my teacup. Xiao Jing'an, do you believe that as long as you reserve the title of your lawful wife for me, I should be overwhelmed with gratitude? His brows drew together. Why must you always make everything sound so ugly? Because I heard enough beautiful lies in my previous life. What? He had not heard me clearly, and I did not explain. You say Liu Zhiwei is pitiful, but you heard what was in her heart yesterday. She wants to use the Shen family to change her fortunes, step on me to rise higher and exploit you. Why do you still protect her? Xiao Jing'an's face paled, then quickly hardened again. That voice appeared under suspicious circumstances. It cannot be trusted. Even if she once had a wayward thought, it would only be because she has endured contempt for years and harbors resentment. No one is a saint who has never had a dark thought. I laughed. So in Heir Xiao's eyes, wanting to destroy another person's entire family is merely a small dark thought. He had no answer. My brother spoke coldly from the side. Since Heir Xiao is so magnanimous, why not acknowledge Miss Liu as an adopted younger sister and enter her name into the Xiao genealogy? Then whenever she wishes to use someone's reputation to improve her position, the Marquis's household can stand behind her. Xiao Jing'an's face immediately became ugly. He was willing to protect Liu Zhiwei and pity her, but he was unwilling to let her occupy a legitimate place in the Xiao family. I saw his so-called devotion clearly. He wanted Liu Zhiwei's dependence without sacrificing any of his own interests. I took the marriage agreement from the sandalwood box and placed it on the table. Xiao Jing'an, let us end the engagement. He stared fixedly at the document. Have you thought this through? A woman who breaks an engagement damages her reputation. Without the Jing'an Marquis household, whom could you possibly marry? Mother's expression instantly turned cold. My brother stepped forward, but I raised a hand to stop them. I looked at Xiao Jing'an and suddenly felt that he had asked precisely the question I needed to answer. Why had I been afraid to break the engagement in my previous life? Because I feared the capital's gossip. I feared troubling my parents. I feared that no good marriage would ever come again. I feared everyone saying Shen Mingtang lacked virtue because she could not tolerate her fiancé's childhood sweetheart. Only after dying once did I understand that however precious reputation might be, it was not more precious than life. I said distinctly, here Xiao has misunderstood. I am not ending the engagement so I may marry someone else. I simply believe the Shen family's door should never open to a man whose heart belongs to another woman. His pupils contracted. I pushed the marriage agreement toward him. From this day forward, you may protect your childhood sweetheart, and I will walk my own road. Our engagement ends here. The room fell silent. Zhao Jing'an stared at me as though seeing me for the first time. After a long while he sneered. Shen Mingtong, you will regret this. I smiled as well. Save those words for yourself. By the time father returned that afternoon, news of the broken engagement had spread through half the capital. He did not blame me. He merely shut himself in his study for half an hour. When he emerged, he said, I will personally write to the Xiao family. Standing at the study door, I tightened my fingers. Father, you do not blame me. He looked at me for a long time. Blame you for what? For finally understanding that you should not entrust your life to a muddle-headed man? My eyes suddenly burned. Father sighed. I always taught you to be courteous, but I forgot to teach you that courtesy must be reserved for those who deserve it. I lowered my head. I have caused you trouble, Mingtang. I looked up when he called my name. The daughter of the Shen family does not need a marriage to establish her worth. In my previous life, I had longed until death to hear those words. By then, it had been too late in this life. I finally heard them. After news of the broken engagement spread, the capital erupted in discussion. Some called me jealous. Some said I had used the power of the Grand Tutor's residence to bully an orphan. Others praised Zhao Jing'an as loyal and honorable for remembering an old friendship. I did not rush to defend myself, because I knew Liu Zhiwei would certainly try to regain the ground she had lost. Sure enough, 3 days later an invitation arrived at the Shen residence. It was for a spring poetry gathering at the residence of Commandery Princess Amping. The invitation clearly stated that Liu Zhiwei would attend. Fu Shuang returned from asking around, furious. My lady, peoples outside say Miss Liu wrote an excellent poem while she was ill. Commandery Princess Amping praised it lavishly and specially invited her to recite it at the gathering. They also say that if you had not stood in her way, she would already have become master's disciple and earned fame as one of the capital's talented women. I accepted the invitation and ran my fingertip over the words, Spring Poetry Gathering. I remembered this day too. In my previous life, Liu Zhiwei had stunned the capital at this very gathering with a poem called Spring River Reflections. From that day onward, she was celebrated as a gifted woman. But she had not written the poem. It came from the posthumous manuscripts of Lu Wanzhao, an impoverished female scholar. After Lu Wanzhao died, her daughter, Lu Qingheng, carried those manuscripts from place to place, seeking help. Liu Zhiwei deceived her and took them in my previous life. Lu Qingheng later died after being driven to utter despair. Only afterward did I learn the truth from fragments of my brother's investigation. In this life she should still be alive. I put away the invitation. Fu Shuang, prepare the carriage. Where are we going, my lady? To the Liu family's alley in the southern city. If Liu Zhiwei intended to use stolen literary fame to reverse her fortunes, then I would teach her that stolen things must eventually be returned. The Liu family's alley in the southern city was even more dilapidated than I remembered. The flagstone road was broken and uneven with rainwater pooling in the cracks. Mud splashed up as the carriage wheels passed. As Fu Shuang helped me down, she asked in a low voice, My lady, does the Liu family truly live here? I looked toward the worn wooden door at the end of the alley, and my heart sank slightly. By the time I learned Lu Qingheng's name in my previous life, she was already dead. My brother's surviving notes had recorded only a few stark words. Lu Qingheng, daughter of the Liu family, carried her mother's manuscripts to the capital. After Liu stole the manuscripts, Lu Qingheng was driven to her death. At the time, I had been trapped in the cold courtyard of the Marquis's residence. I could not even protect my own life, much less seek justice for a woman I had never met. Since I had arrived in time now, I could not allow Lu Qingheng to meet the same end again. We knocked 3 times. No one answered for a long while. Fu Shuang was about to knock again when the door opened a narrow crack. A woman in a plain cotton dress stood behind it. She appeared 18 or 19 with a thin face and an unhealthy pallor, but her eyes were exceptionally bright-guarded and edged with thorns. Whom are you looking for? I did not assume the posture of the Grand Tutor's noble daughter. I simply bowed slightly. Miss Liu, I am Shin Mingtong. Her suspicion deepened. Miss Shin of the Grand Tutor's residence? Yes, she laughed coldly. Why would a noble woman come to a place like this? To amuse herself by observing the poor Fu Shuang frowned. Watch how you speak. I raised a hand to stop her. It was entirely too unnatural for Lu Qingheng to dislike me. After Liu Zhiwei stole her mother's manuscripts in my previous life, she used her reputation as a talented woman to move freely among powerful households. In Lu Qingheng's eyes, a noble woman like me was probably no different from her. I said softly. I came today to ask you one question. What question? Did your mother, scholar Lu Wenjiao, leave behind a collection titled Reflections? Lu Qingheng's expression changed violently. She pulled the door wide open and stared at me like a blade. How do you know? I did not circle the issue. At Commandery Princess Amping's poetry gathering 3 days from now, Liu Zhiwei will recite a poem called Spring River Reflections. That poem comes from the Reflections collection. Lu Qingzhen stared at me for a long moment, then suddenly laughed with bitter mockery. And so? Has Miss Shen come to tell me that Liu Zhiwei stole my mother's poem? Or have you come to purchase my silence on her behalf? Fu Shuang was about to respond, but once again I stopped her. I understood why Lu Qingheng thought that way. She was a poor woman who had carried her late mother's manuscripts to the capital in hopes of winning justice for her. She had no connections and no patron. Meeting someone like Liu Zhiwei while carrying such treasures was like walking into a den of wolves with gold in her arms. Once a person has been bitten by a wolf, everyone begins to look like one. I took a sheet of paper from my sleeve the previous night. Relying on my memories from my former life, I had written down the opening 4 lines of Spring River Reflections. Lu Qingheng needed only one glance before her face turned completely white. She snatched the paper from me, her voice trembling. My mother wrote this. She wrote it shortly before she died. She said it was unfinished. No one but me has ever seen the entire poem. Liu Zhiwei has seen it. Lu Qingheng's eyes reddened instantly, though she fought to keep her tears from falling. She told me she could help present the manuscripts to powerful people. She said my mother's literary talent should not be buried. She also said she knew the heir to the Jing'an marquisate and had ties to the Grand Tutor's residence. Her fingers crumpled the paper. I believed her. I remained silent as Lu Qingheng's voice grew hoarser. Later, the manuscripts disappeared. She claimed rain had ruined them on the road, and that only a few damaged pages remained. When I went to confront her, the nanny beside her drove me away and accused me of falsely implicating a noblewoman. I reported the theft, but the constables asked what evidence I possessed. She raised her eyes to me, hatred filling them. Miss Shen, when noblewomen like you take what belongs to others, do you not even owe us an explanation? The words pricked my heart, not because she had offended me, but because I knew that in my previous life, she had never even managed to ask Liu Zhiwei that question face to face. I answered seriously. Miss Liu, I did not come to buy your silence, nor did I come to plead for Liu Zhiwei. I came to invite you to the poetry gathering in 3 days. She laughed sarcastically. For what? To watch her recite my mother's poem in public and receive praise from the entire capital? To reclaim your mother's name. Lu Qingheng went still. I continued. If you are willing, I will have people escort you safely into the Commandery Princess's residence. You need only bring your mother's original manuscripts, her seal, and the pages showing her revisions. I will speak the remaining words. She watched me for a long time. Why should I trust you? You do not need to trust me, I said quietly. You only need to trust your mother's handwriting. At those words, the thorns in her eyes seemed to tremble. After a moment, Lu Qingheng turned and went inside. When she returned, she held an old cloth bundle in her arms. She opened it to reveal a roll of yellowed poetry manuscripts. The paper edges were worn, the ink varied in darkness, and many passages bore red correction marks. Lu Qingheng stroked the manuscripts gently. These are the last things my mother left behind. I accepted them solemnly, then immediately returned them to her. On the day of the gathering, carry them yourself. She looked at me in surprise. They are your mother's manuscripts, I said. You should be the one to reclaim her name with your own hands. 3 days later, I arrived at the spring poetry gathering at Commandery Princess Amping's residence. The garden was already filled with noblewomen from the capital. Liu Zhiwei was there as well. She wore a pale green dress and her illness had not entirely faded. It made her look even more delicate and pitiable. Xiao Jing'an had not entered the women's gathering, but the Marquis's residence had sent female relatives to accompany her, clearly, to lend her support. The moment I appeared, the voices in the garden softened. Some women hid their mouths behind handkerchiefs as they looked at me. Others exchanged glances waiting for entertainment. One deliberately said loudly, "Mission came too?" I thought that after ending the engagement, she would not wish to see Miss Liu. I pretended not to hear and took my seat. Commandery Princess Amping enjoyed lively occasions and smiled to smooth things over. Today, we discuss poetry, not private affairs, Miss Liu. I thought your Spring River Reflections was excellent. Why don't you begin? Liu Zhiwei rose and stole a timid glance at me. With Sister Shen present, I hardly dare present my humble work. Whispers immediately spread around us. I lifted my tea and took a sip. She was still performing. When I refused to respond, Liu Zhiwei lowered her eyes. Then I will risk embarrassing myself, she recited slowly. Overnight, the spring river washes all adornment away. A lone reflected boat enters the evening glow. I ask not whether the east wind pities these frail bones. I leave only the clear moon shining over cold sand. The garden fell silent for a moment. Then praise erupted. What an excellent poem! Miss Liu truly possesses extraordinary talent. It is a great pity that someone like her cannot become the Grand Tutor's disciple. A trace of satisfaction flashed through Liu Zhiwei's eyes before she quickly suppressed it. She turned toward me, her voice gentle. What does Sister Shen think? I set down my teacup. It is an excellent poem. The corners of her lips lifted. I continued. Unfortunately, it is not yours. The entire garden went silent. Liu Zhiwei's face turned deathly pale. Sister Shen, why must you slander me again? A woman from the Marquis's household immediately said, Miss Liu has already yielded again and again. Why must you keep pressing her? I looked toward Commandery Princess Amping. Your Highness, since this is a poetry gathering, if someone has stolen the work of a deceased scholar, should the truth not be explained publicly? The Commandery Princess's expression became serious. Naturally, I clapped lightly. Outside the garden, Fu Shuang led Lu Qingheng inside. Lu Qingheng wore a faded blue-green dress washed nearly white and held the old manuscripts in her arms. She walked step by step before the assembled guests. Her fingers were pale with tension, but she did not retreat. The instant Liu Zhiwei saw her, her entire body stiffened. I asked. Miss Liu forced a smile. I do not. Lu Qingheng said coldly. Miss Liu, noble people truly have short memories. Half a month ago, when you took the Reflections collection from me, you did not speak this way. The garden erupted in surprise. Liu Zhiwei immediately began to cry. I do not know what you are talking about. Sister Shen, in order to destroy my reputation, you even found someone to give false testimony? I did not rush to argue. I only looked at Lu Qingheng. She drew a deep breath and opened the manuscripts. Spring River Reflections was written by my mother Lu Wenzhao. The original is here for everyone to inspect. It bears my mother's private seal and her red revision. Marks in the 4 lines. Miss Liu recited the second line was originally a lone boat reflects the evening glow. My mother later changed it to a lone boat enters the evening glow. A female scholar serving Commandery Princess Amping stepped forward to examine the pages. She studied them for a long time, her expression growing graver. The paper, ink and seal are all old. The revisions were not made recently. Color slowly drained from Liu Zhiwei's face, but she still refused to admit anything. Similar poems exist everywhere. Just because she says her mother wrote it does not prove that her mother did. Anger surged in Lu Qingheng's eyes. I pressed her hand to signal that she should wait. Then I drew another sheet of paper from my sleeve. Miss Liu has a point. One poem alone might perhaps be dismissed as coincidence. What about these 3? I handed the page to Commandery Princess Amping. Moon at the Cold Window, Song of Autumn Waters, and Thoughts During Illness. 3 poems Miss Liu recently sent to the Marquise's residence also appear in Scholar Liu's manuscripts. Anyone who doubts it may compare them line by line. The female scholar accepted the paper. Her expression changed almost immediately. The wording is nearly identical. Discussion exploded throughout the garden. She truly stole the poems. No wonder word suddenly spread that she had composed poetry during her illness. She had stolen it beforehand, and I believed she was talented. Zhiwei swayed and suddenly pointed at me. It was you, Shen Mingtang. You are harming me. You stopped me from becoming your father's disciple. You will not allow me to remain beside brother Jing'an. Now you have found someone to accuse me falsely of stealing poems. Why must you force me to die? Her cries were piercing, as though she had suffered every injustice in the world. In my previous life, the guests might have wavered again. This time, I gave her no such opportunity. I took the heart-revealing jade from my sleeve, concealed it beneath my wide cuff, and whispered the incantation. The heart conceals nothing, hidden thoughts reveal themselves. A heartbeat later, Liu Zhiwei's shrill thoughts rang out again. That wretched woman! How could she know about Lu Wenzhao's manuscripts? I clearly frightened that fool Lu Qing's into silence. How did she dare come to the poetry gathering? No, I cannot admit it. As long as I cry and act as though I am being persecuted, they will believe me. Every face in the garden changed. Liu Zhiwei's sobbing stopped abruptly. She looked around in confusion, finally realizing that her disguise had once again been stripped away. So it truly was you. Liu Zhiwei's lips shook. No. Lu Qingheng suddenly stepped forward and slapped her across the face. The sound cracked through the garden, and no one stopped her. With red-rimmed eyes, Lu Qingheng said, "That was for my mother." Liu Zhiwei held her cheek, hatred nearly overflowing from her eyes. I rose and walked toward her. Liu Zhiwei, when you failed to become father's disciple, you tried to reverse your fortunes through literary fame. But a reputation built on stolen work will never belong to you. She glared at me and spoke so quietly that only I could hear. Shinmingtang, do not be so pleased with yourself. I looked down at her. Each time you find a new patron, I will cut that support away. You are welcome to keep trying. Panic flickered in her eyes, though she quickly suppressed it. At that moment, a pale gold sheet of decorative stationery slipped from her sleeve. Fu Shuang reacted quickly, picked it up and handed it to me. There was no name on the paper, only a faint blue pattern. I had seen that design in the remnants of my brother's case files in my previous life. It belonged to the third prince's household, so he had extended his hand toward the Shen family this early. I tightened my grip on the stationery, my heart sinking. Liu Zhiwei had lost the Shen family, and lost her reputation as a gifted woman. But she had not yet reached a dead end. She still had another patron in this life, however. I would not wait until the Shen family was framed before waking to the danger. I put the stationery away and looked at the shocked guests around the garden. Today's poetry gathering appears to have exposed more than a poem thief. It has also exposed the hand using that thief to test the Shen family. By the time we left Commandery Princess Amping's residence, the sky had darkened. Lu Qingheng followed behind me, holding her mother's manuscripts. She said nothing until we entered the carriage. Then she asked quietly, "Miss Shen, you proved my mother's authorship today. What do you want me to do in return?" I looked at her. She sat perfectly straight, though her dress had been washed almost white. Her spine had not bent in the slightest. She was not ungrateful. She simply refused to be bound again by someone else's favor. I trusted such a person more. "I do not want you to do anything," I said. Lu Qingheng clearly did not believe me. I placed the pale gold stationery on the small table between us. "But I would like you to help me identify this. Have you ever seen such paper in Liu Zhiwei's possession?" Lu Qingheng looked down and her expression changed slightly. "I have." My fingers paused. "When?" "Half a month ago, when she came to the Liu family's alley and took my mother's manuscripts. His maidservant was collecting things for her, and I saw a sheet like this fall from her sleeve. She picked it up immediately. I only noticed the blue pattern." Fu Shuang drew a sharp breath beside us. I said nothing and carefully stored the paper away. My brother's surviving notes from my previous life had mentioned an advisor in the third prince's household named Wen Heng. He favored pale gold stationery with blue patterns for secret correspondence. The paper looked elegant, but its pulp carried a faint orchid fragrance. When held near a flame, its edges curled and turned blue-green. Ordinary workshops could not produce it. For Liu Zhiwei to possess such stationery meant she had already been communicating with the third prince's household. I had always believed the third prince noticed the Shen family only after Liu Zhiwei became father's disciple. Now I understood that was not so. He had chosen her long before. Her request for apprenticeship was merely the first step. When the carriage stopped outside the Shen residence, Lu Qingheng prepared to get out. I called to her. "Slu, if you have nowhere safe to stay for now, you may live in the Shen family's side residence. It is neither imprisonment nor charity. Liu Zhiwei lost her literary reputation today and will hate you for it. Remaining in the Liu family's alley would be dangerous." Lu Qingheng's brows tightened. Her first instinct was to refuse, but when her fingers touched the manuscripts in her arms, she fell silent. After a long while she said, "I can stay, but I will not eat without working." "Very well," I smiled. "Then copybooks for me. The Shen library contains many old volumes that need sorting." She looked at me, and at last some of the wariness in her eyes faded. Agreed. That evening I took the stationery to father. He was reading case files in his study. My brother had retrieved the files from the Ministry of Justice, and they concerned the Liu family's old embezzlement case. Candlelight fell across father's brow, making him resemble a silent mountain. In my previous life, that mountain had finally been bent by the wind and snow of exile. I would never allow him to fall again. I placed the stationery on the desk. "Father, this fell from Liu Zhiwei's sleeve today." He picked it up and examined it. Unfamiliar with such secret devices, he only asked, "What is unusual about it?" "This is the blue pattern stationery often used by Wen Heng, an advisor in the third prince's household." Father's gaze sharpened. "How do you know?" I had already prepared an explanation. While sorting old papers in the library recently, I found a visiting card Wen Heng once sent to one of your former students. Its pattern matched this one. I was curious and remembered it. That was half true and half false. An old note from Wen Heng did indeed remain in the Shen library, but I had recognized the blue pattern stationery only because I had seen it described in my brother's surviving files in my previous life. Father remained silent for a long time. Then he held the paper near the candle flame. Its corners curled and took on a faint blue-green tint. His expression finally changed. The third prince. The air in the study suddenly grew heavy. The Shen family had always kept itself outside the struggle for succession. Father had served as junior tutor to the crown prince and had instructed several imperial princes, but he never privately aligned himself with any faction. That was precisely why the Shen family's spotless reputation was something every prince wanted, but none could obtain. I lowered my voice. Father, Liu Zhiwei failed to become your disciple today, and her theft of the poems has also been exposed. If she were merely a destitute orphan, she should never have been able to obtain something from the third prince's household so early. Father looked at me. You suspect she is a piece sent by the third prince to approach the Shen family. It is more than suspicion. I raised my eyes. I am almost certain. Father did not answer immediately. I knew the implication was grave for him. He could refuse Liu Zhiwei as a disciple because her character was corrupt, but once the matter involved an imperial prince's struggle for succession, it was no longer something the Shen household could resolve privately. Father said gravely, Mingtang, such an accusation must not be made carelessly. I understand. That is why I do not intend to rely on mere accusations. I took another sheet of paper from my sleeve. Father glanced at it and frowned. This is a list of my former students, or rather a false list of your former students. He abruptly looked up at me. I said calmly, I would like Father to leave it in the outer room of your study and give Liu Zhiwei's people an opportunity to steal it. His expression hardened. Do you understand what a list of my students signifies? I do. Your former students serve throughout the court and the provinces. If such a list fell into an imperial prince's hands, at best those officials could be recruited or exploited. At worst, it could be presented as proof that the Shen family had formed a political faction. That was precisely how the Shen family had fallen in my previous life. Liu Zhiwei stole one of Father's private registers of correspondence. The third prince's household altered it slightly and turned it into evidence that the Shen family had secretly gathered court officials around itself. By then I had already married into the marquise's residence and been trapped in its inner compound. When I finally heard what had happened, the Shen residence had already been searched and sealed in this life. I wanted them to steal the list, but what they stole would be a blade I had deliberately placed in their hands. Father studied the document, his frown deepening. Some of these names are real and some are false. I pointed them out. These 3 truly were your students, but they were posted to distant regions years ago and have had no dealings with the capital. These 2 names were copied from old local records. No such people exist, and this place name has deliberately been written with 1 incorrect stroke. Father's gaze grew darker. Why include an error? Because Wenheng once helped revise regional gazetteers for the third prince's household. If he sees this particular mistake, he will believe it was copied from one of Father's own old drafts. My brother once told me that Wenheng is especially skilled at authenticating documents through handwriting habits and repeated errors. I nearly let the words, in my previous life, slip out. Fortunately, Father's attention remained on the list, and he did not question me. He was silent for a long time. Only the faint crackle of the candlewick sounded in the study. At last he put the list down. Tang, if this plan succeeds, it could draw out proof that the third prince's household has interfered with the Shen family. If it fails, the Shen family could be dragged into the succession struggle ahead of time. I met his gaze. Father, the Shen family is already inside the game. Even if we do not reach out, their blade will still fall. For the first time, Father did not look at me merely as a father judging his daughter. He regarded me as an experienced, upright official might regard someone walking the same road. What do you intend to do? Those words made my heart tremble. In my previous life, Father had always protected me, believing I should never be burdened with such storms. In this life, he finally asked me what I intended to do. I drew a deep breath. First, release word that after Liu Zhiwei's theft of the poems, Father has begun reviewing the register of your former students and intends to submit a memorial declaring that the Shen family has never formed a faction. Second, leave this false list in the outer study. Do not guard it too closely. We need certain people to believe they obtained it with difficulty. Third, investigate the household servants in secret. Anyone capable of sending information outside must already be inside the Shen residence. Fourth, ask brother to follow Liu Zhiwei's movements after she leaves the Marquis' residence. Father slowly nodded after hearing me. Yancy is not at home today. I will ask him to see you tomorrow. I shook my head. He must come tonight. Father hesitated. Why? I could not tell him that in my previous life, Liu Zhiwei had always counterattacked immediately after a defeat, nor could I explain that the third prince would not give the Shin family much time. I know Liu Zhiwei lost face at the poetry gathering today. If the third prince truly stands behind her, he will make a move tonight. Father immediately sent someone to find my brother at the Ministry of Justice. It was late at night when Shin Yanzi returned. After hearing my plan, he did not first ask how I knew these things as father had. He simply picked up the false list and examined it. Years of investigating cases had made his eye harsher than father's. He quickly identified the weakness. False names alone are not enough. What is missing? I asked. He pointed to one entry. Someone whose appearance on this list would force the third prince's household to act immediately. If it contains only ordinary former students, they can investigate slowly. But if it includes someone suspected of being a close confidant of the crown prince, they will become impatient. I understood. Whom does brother suggest? Shen. Yanzi picked up a brush and wrote 3 characters at the bottom of the list. Pei. Shenji. I knew the name. He was an official in the crown prince's household. In my previous life, the third prince's faction had framed him for corruption, and he was ultimately dismissed and sent home. Father once said Pi Shenxi was upright and capable, but had been destroyed by factional conflict. My brother explained. Pei Shenji is not father's student, but the third prince has long suspected that he communicates privately with the upright officials of father's circle. Place his name here and they will act. I looked at the name, heaviness settling in my chest. The game had begun this time, however. The person setting the pieces would not be Liu Zhiwei or the third prince, it would be me. The next day, the Cheyenne residents openly began organizing father's old student records. Father deliberately reprimanded the household steward in his study, saying the old papers were disordered and must be catalogued before malicious people could use them to create trouble. The remark quickly spread throughout the inner household. I sat in Tangli courtyard while Fushuang reported each suspicious movement. Servant Liu, who sweeps the outer courtyard, visited the side gate twice more than usual today. A newly hired kitchen servant requested leave 5 days after entering the household, claiming his mother was ill. Chun Tao, a second-rank maid in Madam's courtyard, spoke last night with one of the older servants who accompanied Nanny Chen. I remembered that name from my previous life. After my brother was attacked, the assassin had carried one of my handkerchiefs. Mother later discovered that a maid named Chuntao had stolen it from my room. Before she could be properly interrogated, Chuntao was found dead, severing every remaining lead. In this life she had exposed herself much earlier. Do not touch her yet, I said quietly. Fu Shuang looked puzzled. My lady, if she truly has a problem, precisely because she has a problem, we must keep her. I looked toward father's study. The fish has not bitten. We must not disturb the water. That night, someone entered the outer study exactly as expected. The intruder did not take the entire list, but hurriedly copied it. Father's hidden guard saw everything clearly and did not intervene. Early the next morning, one of my brother's men reported that the copied list had been delivered to the rear gate of Jing'an Marquis Manor. Half an hour later, a blue-curtained carriage from the Marquis household went to a side entrance of the third princess's residence. I listened from my seat by the window and slowly set down my teacup. Li, Zhao Jing'an, and the third prince. At last, the 3 threads had twisted together. Fu Shuang suppressed her anger. My lady, what do we do now? I looked at the newborn sunlight along the horizon. Wait, for what? For them to take the false list to court and impeach the Shin family. Fu Shuang's face went white. My lady, that is far too dangerous. It is dangerous, but in my previous life, the Shen family was unprepared, and their blade still came down. In this life, I placed the blade in their hands so that everyone can see who is holding it. That afternoon, before father's memorial requesting an imperial audience had even been submitted, news of an impeachment reached the residence. The young servant delivering the message knelt in the front hall, his voice trembling. Master, someone from the censorate has submitted a memorial accusing the Shen family of secretly associating with the Crown Prince's faction, concealing a list of former students, and attempting to interfere with the succession. Mother's face went pale. I took her hand, pressing my warm palm against her cold fingers. Mother, do not be afraid. She looked at me, I said softly. They are the ones who have drawn this blade. On the day father entered the palace, the gates of the Shen residence remained tightly shut outside. Rumors spread like fire carried by the wind. Some said Grand Tutor Shen only pretended to be an upright, independent official, while secretly supporting the Crown Prince. Others claimed my broken engagement was merely a cover. and that the Shen family had already formed a deeper connection with the Eastern Palace. Still others said Liu Zhiwei had been refused as father's disciple because she accidentally discovered the secret student register, and that I had publicly framed her to silence her. Fu Shuang's eyes reddened with fury. She wanted to rush outside and argue with everyone, but I ordered the courtyard gate closed. My lady, are we simply going to let them slander the Shen family? I continued writing at my desk without looking up. The more dangerous the moment, the less we can rush to defend ourselves. But people outside nearly call the Shen family traitors. My brush paused at my previous life when rumors truly began crushing the Shen family. I had panicked too. I wept and begged Xiao Jing'an to let me return to my parents' home so I could speak one word in father's defense. But the gates of the Marquis's residence remained closed. Liu Zhiwei stood beneath the covered corridor and gently told me, "Sister Shen, you are now a woman of the Marquis's household. If you return to the Shen family, will that not make both families appear to be conspiring together?" I believed her then. Bound by reputation and propriety, I watched helplessly as layer after layer of filth submerged the Shen family. I would not make the same mistake again. I set the finished calligraphy aside to dry, contained a single 4-character phrase, "Wait for their defeat." I told Fu Shuang, "Rummers are not defeated by shouting in court today. Father will make them spit out every hook they swallowed." Mother sat beside me, rolling prayer beads through her fingers. She appeared calm, but her fingertips were white. I rose and poured her a cup of hot tea. "Mother, if you are frightened, you may scold me." She stared, then laughed despite herself. "What daughter asked to be scolded?" I crouched beside her knee and leaned close as I had when I was a child. "I am afraid you will hold everything inside." Mother's hand gently settled on my hair. "Mingtang, mother is indeed afraid." Her voice was quiet, but she did not evade the truth. "I fear something will happen to your father. I fear your brother will be drawn in again. I also fear you are carrying too much. But what I fear even more is that if the Shishin family retreats today, we will live forever with someone else's hand around our necks." I looked up at her. There was tenderness in Mother's eyes, but also an edge I had never truly recognized before. "So Mother will not advise you to retreat." My throat tightened in my previous life. I had always believed I stood alone. In truth, it was not that my family refused to protect me. I had hidden all my pain and kept them outside the truth. In this life I spread the entire game before them, and every one of them stood beside me. Near midday, news finally came from the palace. My brother returned first. He entered with dust from the palace road, still clinging to his official robe. Mother immediately rose. "Where is your father?" "Father remains in the palace, but for now he is safe." Mother released a breath. I asked, "What happened in court, Shen?" Yancy looked at me, the faintest hint of a smile in his eyes. "Exactly as you predicted." I invited him to sit, but he remained standing in the hall and told us everything that had happened. I had not witnessed the scene myself, so I could only reconstruct the sharp confrontation through his account. Before the imperial court, Censor Qian publicly impeached father and presented a copied list. He claimed it contained Pei Shenji of the Crown Prince's household, Zhou Heng of the Ministry of Rights, Chen Huayuan, the Salt Inspector Censor for Jiangnan, and other officials who were secretly connected to the Shen family. The emperor was furious and ordered father to defend himself. Father did not immediately proclaim his innocence. He merely asked Censor Qian where the list had come from. Censor Qian said an informant had reported that it originated in the Shen family study. Father then asked where the original was. Censor Qian could not answer. He claimed the informant dared not show himself and had only managed to copy it. At this point in his account, my brother laughed coldly. Father then petitioned His Majesty to have the Shin family's genuine old student register brought into court. Father had sealed it with his own hands last night and entrusted it to a senior palace eunuch to carry inside. It contained neither Pi Shenji nor any of the fabricated names. Shen Yanqi continued. Once the two lists were compared, they discovered that 4 people on Censor Qian's list did not exist at all. Mother drew a quiet breath. My brother looked at me. Most importantly, Father publicly pointed out the place name you deliberately wrote incorrectly. No such location exists anywhere on the maps of Great Yang. Censor Qian's face changed on the spot. What about Wen Heng? I asked. My brother's expression darkened. Father mentioned the blue pattern stationery. He told the emperor that the Shen family had recently discovered correspondence between Liu Zhiwei and someone using the stationery, favored by an advisor in the third prince's household. The forged student register Censor Qian presented was identical to the false student register stolen from the Shen study. Father said the Shen family would not recklessly accuse an imperial prince, but requested that His Majesty thoroughly investigate the source of the forgery. Mother's prayer beads paused. What did His Majesty say? He ordered the Court of Judicial Review to take the case immediately. Censor Qian has been detained for questioning. The third prince was also present in court. He looked furious but had no choice except to request a full investigation himself to prove his innocence. I closed my eyes briefly. It had worked. At least the first step had worked. The third prince would not fall immediately, but his hand had been dragged into the light. A prince seeking the throne did not fear one failed plot as much as he feared the emperor discovering that he secretly framed upright officials. This time, father had not merely defended himself. He had pushed the source of the forged evidence back toward the third prince's household. My brother continued. Father asked me to tell you that the matter of the false list must not be mentioned to anyone else. It is also time to close the net around the traitor inside the residence. I nodded. What about Chuntao? He glanced at me. You truly did know she was suspicious. I only guessed. He did not press me. Instead, he handed me a short red thread. The person who copied the list wore dark clothing. When she climbed over the low wall of the outer courtyard, a thorn caught a strand from her dress. This red thread matches the fabric of Chuntao's clothing. Fu Shuang went pale. Chuntao was a second-rank maid whom mother had assigned to my courtyard 3 years earlier. She rarely spoke and usually worked steadily. Without memories of my previous life, I would never have suspected her so early. I accepted the thread without surprise. Do not alert her yet. My brother frowned. You still do not want to arrest her? Chuntao is only a small fish. If we seize her now, at most she will implicate Liu Zhiwei. But Liu Zhiwei has the third prince's household behind her. If Liu refuses to confess, Chuntao may die mysteriously before we learn the truth, just as she did in my dream. My brother caught the wording at once. In your dream? Mother also looked at me. After a moment of silence, I finally said, I had a very long dream. It was the first time I voluntarily spoke to my family about my previous life. I could not say that I had returned from death. It sounded too impossible and carried too much pain. But I could call it a dream. In the dream, Chuntao stole one of my handkerchiefs. Later, brother was attacked, and the assailant carried that handkerchief. Everyone claimed that bitterness over the broken engagement had driven me to arrange the attack on brother. Mother's prayer beads fell onto the table. Ming-tang. My brother's face became terrifyingly grave, but he did not interrupt. I continued. Before Chuntao could be properly questioned, she was found dead. The trail ended with her. After that, the Shen family was accused of forming a faction. Father was exiled and brother. My throat closed. My brother came to stand before me, his voice very gentle. What happened to me? I looked up at him. The brother before me was alive, his features strong and upright, the dust of the palace road still clinging to his official robe. In my previous life, he had been returned to the Shen residence with a fatal wound to his chest. In his hand, he still clutched an unfinished letter. Little sister. Do not trust Liu. I closed my eyes. Brother died on the road back to the capital. Mother covered her mouth. My brother remained silent for a long time. He did not ask whether the dream was true, nor did he laugh at its impossibility. He merely raised a hand and rubbed the top of my head as he had when we were children. Then this time your brother will not take that road. Those words nearly made me cry. When father returned that evening, he looked exhausted, but his eyes were bright. The first thing he said upon seeing me was, Ming Tang. The move was dangerous, but it worked. I bowed. I took too great a risk. Father shook his head. It was not reckless. It broke the deadlock. He paused, then continued. From today onward, your brother and I will investigate matters outside the residence. You and your mother will decide matters within the household. The Shin family cannot allow anyone to exploit another opening from inside. As I looked at him, something in my chest slowly settled. In my previous life, I had feared father's disappointment above all else. In this life, he trusted me. That evening, mother gathered all the household servants in the reception hall. Under the pretext of reviewing the maid's monthly allowances, Chuntao stood at the back of the crowd, her head lowered. I sat beside mother and watched her. Mother did not accuse anyone immediately. She first questioned the stewards of each courtyard about recent accounts and movements, checking every detail one by one. Everyone in the hall held their breath. When Chuntao's turn came, her fingers trembled slightly. Mother asked indifferently, Chuntao, where did you go last night? Chuntao dropped to her knees. I slept in my room all night and never went outside. Mother glanced at me. I placed the red thread on the table. Then did this thread grow legs and run to the low wall of the outer courtyard by itself? Chuntao's face turned ashen. She pressed her forehead to the floor. My lady, spare me. I only passed a few messages for Miss Liu. I did not know she meant to harm the Shen family. The hall erupted in shock. I did not let her continue crying. Who ordered you to steal the list? Chuntao shook all over. An older servant beside Miss Liu. She said that if I helped, then after Miss Liu entered the Marquis's residence, she would ask the heir to remove my servant status and find me a good marriage. Fu Shuang trembled with anger. You betrayed the household for that? Chuntao wept. I only wanted to leave the residence. I did not want to remain a maid all my life. Looking at her, I suddenly thought of Lu Qingheng, who also wanted a road out of poverty. Some people struggled with their own hands. Others purchased their future with someone else's life. I asked, what about the handkerchiefs? Chuntao snapped her head up. What handkerchiefs? My handkerchiefs! How many did you steal? Her face became paper white. Mother tightened her grip on the armrest. At last Chuntao broke down. 2. I stole 2. I gave 1 to Miss Liu and the other remains at the bottom of my chest. I truly do not know what she plans to do with them. I closed my eyes briefly. The scheme to attack my brother was already underway. Just as it had been in my previous life, when I opened them, my voice had turned cold. Guard her closely. Do not allow anything to happen to her. Chuntao's sobbing faltered. She had expected beating or punishment, not an order that she must remain alive and available for questioning. In my previous life, her death had left the Shen family unable to defend itself. In this life, she had to survive long enough to tell the entire truth. That night, my brother placed guards around Chuntao's quarters. He also used the stolen handkerchief to follow Liu Zhiwei's movements in secret. On the 3rd morning, news reached the Shen residence that Liu Zhiwei had left Jing'an Marquis Manor to offer incense at the Guanyin Temple west of the city. My fingers trembled when I heard the location. In my previous life, my brother had been attacked on the official road outside that very temple. They intended to use the same scheme again. I raised my eyes to him. Brother? He had already changed into plain clothes with a sword at his waist. He smiled at me. Do not worry, this time I am the one waiting for them. I did not accompany him to the Guanyin Temple. It was not because I did not want to go, but because I could not. I had lost so terribly in my previous life that I once believed I had to watch every matter personally before I could feel secure. In this life, I was gradually learning that controlling the board did not mean doing everything oneself. It meant placing the right people in the right positions. My brother would catch the attackers. Father would hold the court steady. Mother would guard the inner household. I had to remain inside the Shen residence and wait for the hidden thread within it to reveal its end. The afternoon sky was overcast. I sat in Tangli courtyard embroidering a handkerchief while Fu Shuang paced anxiously around the room. My lady, how can you still embroider at a time like this? I lowered my head and guided the needle through the cloth. This is precisely when I must embroider. Why? I flattened the stitches. Because a handkerchief bearing my embroidery has become a weapon in someone else's hand. I must make everyone understand what my genuine work looks like. Fu Shuang did not fully understand, but did not dare question me further. Half an hour later, hurried footsteps sounded outside. Nanny Chen from Mother's courtyard rushed in. Her face was tense, but not panicked. My lady, the eldest young master has returned. The needle paused in my hand. How is he? He sustained a minor injury, nothing serious. 2 attackers were captured and 1 died during the fight. I sprang to my feet. Although we had prepared, the moment I heard that my brother had been hurt, it felt as though a fist closed around my heart. In my previous life, when his body was returned to the Shen residence, I had been unable even to cry. It felt as if half the sky had collapsed. In this life he had promised not to take that road, yet a blade had still reached him. When I arrived at the front hall, my brother sat in a chair while a physician bandaged his arm. A dark stain had spread across the white cloth. My steps stopped. He looked up and immediately smiled. A minor wound. I did not smile. I walked to him, stared at the injury, and said tightly, Brother promised not to take that road. I did not. He motioned for the physician to continue and spoke as casually as though a branch had scratched him. I took a side road. I simply did not expect them to prepare a second group. It appears they truly intended to silence me this time. My fingers slowly tightened. The attackers? His expression cooled. The 2 we captured carried identification plaques commonly used by the Marquis's household, but the plaques are counterfeit. The dead attacker had your handkerchief. The hall fell silent. Mother's face paled, but she quickly steadied herself. Where is it? My brother placed a blood-stained handkerchief on the table. I recognized it at once. It was one of the older handkerchiefs Chuntao had stolen. A crabapple blossom was embroidered in one corner with the silver thread I had once favored. In my previous life, that handkerchief became evidence that I had plotted against my brother. In this life it lay before us as a hook that could catch the people who planted it. I picked it up and lightly touched the embroidery. Brother, have the attackers spoken? Not yet, but we found a letter on them. He handed it to me. The writer had deliberately imitated a woman's handwriting. Its contents were equally malicious. It claimed that I resented Liu Zhiwei because Xiao Jing'an protected her, and that after my brother prevented me from retaliating against the Marquis' residence, I hired men to injure him and frame her. Fu Shuang's voice changed with fury. What absurd nonsense! Who would believe it? I looked at the letter and suddenly laughed. Many people believed it in my previous life. Fu Shuang froze. I did not explain and only put the letter down. This was written in haste, there are many mistakes. My brother raised an eyebrow. You noticed them? I pointed to the final line. The writer imitated a woman's hand, but forgot that when I write the final character of my name, I never close the last stroke this way. Moreover, this is the pine suit ink commonly used by the accounting office of the Marquis' residence. An ordinary noblewoman would not use it for personal letters. Mother immediately instructed Nanny Chen. Bring me Mingtong's family letters from the past 3 years. Also retrieve the written gift lists and correspondence sent by the Marquis' residence. We will compare the handwriting and the ink. My brother looked at me, amusement deepening in his eyes. It appears this wound was not entirely wasted. I gave him a cold look. If brother says anything like that again, I will ask mother to withhold your wine for half a year. He immediately fell silent. The tense atmosphere finally eased a little, but I knew the rumors outside would not wait for the evidence to be assembled. Sure enough, by dusk word had already spread through the capital that the Shen family's eldest son had been attacked, that the assailant carried my handkerchief, and that after ending my engagement I had changed so drastically that I could not even tolerate my own brother. Rumors soon began spreading that Liu Zhiwei had gone to Guanyin Temple to pray for me, only for me to send men to harm both her and Xiao Jing'an. People claimed that the Grand Tutor's household had failed to raise its daughter properly, and that the Shen family's celebrated integrity merely concealed corruption beneath the surface. The accusations piled up one after another, clearly meant to bury the Shen family's recent victory beneath a fresh scandal. After hearing everything, Mother asked only, "Should we hand Shuntao over now?" I shook my head. There is no hurry. I am waiting for Liu Zhiwei to come in person. Mother looked at me thoughtfully. She has gone to far too much trouble to let the rumors drift outside by themselves, I explained. She will want to see me panic with her own eyes. Better yet, she will try to make me lose control in front of everyone. Only then can she present herself as the victim again. Mother was silent for a moment before suddenly asking, Mingtang, in that dream of yours, did you endure all of this alone for a very long time? My nose stung. In my previous life, I truly had endured far too much. Yet by the end, no one thought I had been wronged. They merely assumed that my silence meant consent. So this time, I said softly, I will not endure it. Early the next morning, Liu Zhiwei arrived exactly as I had expected. She did not enter the residence. Instead, she knelt outside the Shen family's gates with 2 elderly attendants from the Marquis household beside her. A large crowd had gathered at a distance to watch. She wore a plain white dress with gauze wrapped around her forehead. Her face was pale as though she had suffered a terrible fright. Elder sister Shen, I know you hate me, she cried, but I never intended to harm you. If you resent the past between brother Jing'an and me, you may strike me or scold me as you please. Why did you have to involve Lord Shen? He is your own elder brother. Her broken sobs carried across the entrance. The onlookers immediately began whispering. So Mission really sent the attackers? I heard they found her handkerchief on one of them. A woman whose engagement has been broken fears nothing more than losing her reputation. Perhaps she acted rashly. Fu Shuang was so furious that she nearly rushed outside, but I stopped her. I did not leave at once. First I changed into a simple understated dress. Then I had Fu Shuang's bring me the new handkerchief I had finished embroidering the night before. Mother accompanied me to the gate. She squeezed my hand and I nodded to reassure her. When the Shen residence's doors opened, Liu Zhiwei lifted her tear-filled eyes. The moment she saw me, she cried even harder. Elder sister Shen, you are finally willing to see me. I stood at the top of the steps and looked down at her. Liu Zhiwei, have you become addicted to kneeling outside the Shen residence? The surroundings fell silent. Her face stiffened. She clearly had not expected my first words to be so merciless. She quickly lowered her head again. If kneeling can ease elder sister Shen's anger, I am willing to remain here for as long as necessary. Then keep kneeling. I turned and instructed a young servant. Invite an official from the Jingzhou prefecture. Ask the female scholar from Commandery Princess Amping's household to come as well, and invite Miss Liu outside. Liu Zhiwei's expression changed. Elder Sister Shen, what is the meaning of this? I smiled. Did you not come seeking justice? I shall give it to you. The Jingzhou officials arrived quickly. The Shen family had only just faced impeachment, and now we were involved in an attempted assassination case. No one dared treat the matter lightly. Lu Qingheng also came out. She stood beside me, staring at Liu Zhiwei with an expression as cold as if she were looking at filth beneath her feet. I had 3 objects placed before everyone. The first is the stained handkerchief found on one of the attackers. The second is another old handkerchief surrendered by Chuntao. The third is the new handkerchief I embroidered last night. I turned to the clerk from the Jingzhou prefecture. Can you see any differences among them? He studied them carefully. The first 2 are old and faded. The last one is newly made. Examine the embroidery thread. The female scholar from Commandery Princess Amping's household stepped forward. After only one glance, she said, the first 2 were embroidered with powdered silver thread, which noble young ladies in the capital commonly used several years ago. The new one uses plain silver thread. It is stronger and does not shed powder. I nodded. I stopped using powdered silver thread last winter. My mother suffers from a cough, and loose silver powder can irritate the lungs. Nanny Chen, who served mother, immediately produced an account book. These are the purchasing records from the needlework room in Tangli Courtyard, dating from last winter onward. Not a single spool of powdered silver thread was bought. The crowd's murmuring quieted. Liu Zhiwei bit her lip. What does that prove? Perhaps Elder Sister Shen used an old handkerchief. I looked at her. You are right. She froze. That is why we must also examine the corner stitching. I turned the old handkerchief over. There is a loose stitch in one corner. Half a year ago, Chuntao knocked over a cup of tea and stained a batch of my handkerchiefs. Afraid of punishment, she hid them instead of reporting what had happened. 2 older servants then brought Chuntao out from among the crowd. Liu Zhiwei's face instantly turned white. Chuntao fell to her knees, trembling as she cried. It was Servant Liu, who serves Miss Liu, who ordered me to steal them. She said that if I gave her the young lady's old handkerchiefs, she would arrange my release from service and find me a respectable marriage. I did not know they meant to harm the eldest young master. I truly did not know. Liu Zhiwei shrieked. You are lying. I do not even know you. I raised a hand. Another young servant who worked for my brother brought forward a small pouch. This was found in Servant Liu's room. It contains Chuntao's servant contract and silver ingots, given as a reward by the Marquis household. The accounting seal of the Jing'an Marquis Manor is stamped on the bottom. The Jingzhou clerk examined them and his expression became grave. The crowd's attitude changed completely. So the handkerchief was stolen. Then someone tried to frame Miss Shen for the attack on Lord Shen. Why is Miss Liu always surrounded by such convenient coincidences? Liu Zhiwei swayed and tears began falling again. It was not me. I truly did not know what Servant Liu had done. I slowly descended the steps and stopped in front of her. Liu Zhiwei, you never know anything. You knew nothing about the stolen poems, nothing about the stolen student register, and nothing about the handkerchiefs. Then what exactly do you know? She looked up at me, and fear finally appeared in her eyes. The heart-revealing jade was hidden inside my sleeve, but this time I did not use it. I wanted everyone to understand that even without the jade I could still strip away every layer of her deception. I addressed the clerk, Chuntao, Servant Liu, their correspondence, and the Marquis household's silver are all here. The Shen family will submit every piece of evidence to the Jingzhou prefecture for examination. Please also uncover the person behind the attack on my brother. He immediately bowed. Rest assured, Miss Shen, the Jingzhou prefecture will investigate this case thoroughly. Liu Zhiwei finally panicked. She tried to rise, but after kneeling so long she stumbled. At that moment, a carriage from the Marquis household stopped hurriedly nearby. Xiao Jing'an stepped down. When he saw the scene before him, his face darkened. Mingtang, the matter has not yet been fully investigated. Why must you pressure her in public? When I heard those words, I could no longer even be bothered to feel angry. Xiao Jing'an, your timing is excellent. I turned toward him. Silver from the Marquis household. A servant from the Marquis household. A woman protected by the Marquis' household. Yet you say the matter remains unclear. Then please accompany them to the Jingzhou prefecture and explain the connections between your household and this case. His face paled. He looked at Liu Zhiwei. She shook her head through her tears. Brother Jing'an, I did not do it. In the past he would soften the moment she cried. But today countless people were watching, the Jingzhou officials were present, and the marked silver ingots lay plainly before him. For the first time, Xiao Jing'an did not immediately help her up. That hesitation struck the place Liu Zhiwei feared most. She suddenly clutched his sleeve. Brother Jing'an, you believe me, do you not? His lips moved, but no words came out. As I watched them, I suddenly realized that the Shen Mingtang who had once been trapped by old affection truly no longer existed. I turned and walked back into the residence. Behind me, Liu Zhiwei's cries mixed with the crowd's discussions until the closing gates shut them out that night. The Jingzhou prefecture took servant Liu and Chuntou away. Xiao Jing'an was also summoned for questioning. The Marquis household brought Liu Zhiwei back. I heard that she cried throughout the journey, yet the Marquise did not allow her to return to her former guest quarters. She was placed in a remote side courtyard instead. She had lost the Shen family. She had lost her reputation as a talented scholar. Now even Cao Jing'an's trust had begun to waver, but I knew she had not completely lost yet. The real serpent was still hidden in the third prince's residence. Sure enough, on the third day, my brother returned with news. Servant Liu confessed that the order to steal the handkerchiefs came from someone close to Liu Zhiwei, but the attackers were not arranged by the Marquis household. I looked up, his expression was grave. The men carried a prohibited palace drug. My fingers tightened. A palace drug? More precisely, a numbing agent that once leaked from a restricted storehouse belonging to the third prince's residence. When applied to a blade, it can temporarily weaken a person. I lowered my eyes to the heart-revealing jade resting on the table. The poisoned wine in my previous life, the disaster at the palace banquet, my brother's ambush. One thread after another now led to the same place. Mingtang, my brother said, we can no longer remain inside the Shen residence and merely defend ourselves. I slowly closed the jade's box. I know we cannot only defend, it is time to strike back. Brother, investigate something for me. What? Find out how many women Liu Zhiwei has exploited over the years besides Liu Qingheng. He paused. What are you planning? I looked through the window at the brightening sky. She climbed by stepping on other women. Then I will help all those she trampled stand together. Investigating Liu Zhiwei proved easier than I had expected, and more difficult. It was easy because she had harmed so many people and left so many traces. It was difficult because almost none of the women she had hurt dared speak. There was a poor young woman who had copied books for Liu Zhiwei, an embroiderer whom Liu had tricked into handing over her designs, and the daughter of a minor official whose name Liu had borrowed to send letters, leaving the innocent girl disgraced by rumors of private correspondence. There was also a former maid from the Liu household who had discovered evidence that Liu Zheng had embezzled disaster relief funds. Liu Zhiwei had sold her to a remote estate. When my brother's people found these women, most reacted in the same way. Fear. They feared powerful families retaliating. They feared their reputations being ruined again. They feared implicating their relatives. They even feared that I, the Grand Tutor's legitimate daughter, merely intended to use them as pieces in another struggle between noble households. I did not blame them. In my previous life, when I was trapped in the Marquis household's cold courtyard, I too had been afraid. Too afraid to shout, cry, or tell the truth. I feared that speaking would bring an even greater disaster upon the Shen family. So I did not force them to testify at once. Instead, I did one thing beside the Shen family's secondary residence. I opened a small academy. Officially, it existed to help father organize old manuscripts and to employ literate women as copyists and tutors. In truth, I brought in, one by one, the women who had been harmed by Liu Zhiwei and had nowhere else to go. Mother personally arranged their lodgings. Liu Qingheng taught them to proofread poetry and manuscripts. I visited every day and worked beside them to organize the collections of women scholars that had gathered dust for years in the Shen family library. Liu Qingheng proposed the academy's name, Mingshan Hall, the Hall of the Illuminated Heart. An illuminated heart can see the hearts of others, she said, and it can also light its own way. Only 3 women came on the first day, 5 came on the second. By the 7th day, 12 women were seated inside the academy. They were of different ages and backgrounds. Some could compose poetry, some knew only a few hundred characters. Others could barely hold a brush steadily. Yet as they sat together in one room, they realized for the first time that they were not the only ones who had suffered. Ali had once been an embroiderer. Her fingers were nimble with a needle, but they trembled whenever she held a brush. The first time she wrote her own 3-character name, the strokes were crooked and uneven. After finishing, she stared at it for a long time. I asked what was wrong. She answered softly, I embroidered so many other people's names in the past. This is the first time I have felt that my own name is beautiful too. At that moment, many women in the room lowered their heads. It was not that they could not feel pain. They had endured it for so long that they had forgotten how to say it hurt. Sunyang managed the accounts. She had once been a maid in the Liu household, and had personally seen the old ledgers recording Liu Zheng's embezzlement of disaster relief silver. She rarely spoke, but whenever she touched an account book, her eyes became astonishingly bright. Accounts are the least capable of lying, she said. People may argue and make excuses, accounts cannot. I therefore placed Sunyang in charge of Mingshan Hall's daily income and expenses. At first, Mother worried that the responsibility would overwhelm her. Later, she discovered that Sunyang kept more meticulous records than some of the Shen household's oldest stewards. Smiling, Mother told her, "From now on, Mingshan Hall's purse will be entrusted to you." Sunyang hugged the account book and cried. She said that while she had served the Liu family, she could not even be certain of receiving her own monthly wages. She had never imagined that someone would one day entrust her with the finances of an entire academy. Yet Mingshan Hall had been open for only 10 days when opposition began to gather. First, several older women appeared at the entrance to the alley. Every day they stood outside spreading malicious gossip. What respectable family would allow its daughters to show themselves in public? I heard this place accepts only women with ruined reputations. The Grand Tutor's legitimate daughter broke off her engagement and refuses to marry. Now she wants to teach other families' daughters to become restless too. Such words did not kill with one blow. They pricked the flesh one needle at a time. When Ali first heard them, her face turned pale, and she lowered her head and set down her brush. I did not immediately go outside. I wanted to see whether those words would push the women back into silence. A moment later, however, Lu Qingheng stood. She opened the door and looked coldly at the women outside. "Have you finished?" They froze. One of them planted her hands on her hips. "Oh? Are we not even allowed to speak now? If you have done nothing wrong, why should you fear what others say?" "Of course I am afraid," Lu Qingheng replied. The woman had not expected her to admit it and was momentarily speechless. Qingheng continued. "I am afraid that the poetry my mother spent her life composing will be stolen. I am afraid that when I report the theft, officials will drive me away. I am afraid that someone can ruin me and still pretend to be a gifted scholar, seated in a place of honor." She walked down the steps one by one. "But what frightens me even more is suffering and injustice, and then being too afraid of gossiping women like you to speak single word of truth." The women's expressions changed. Standing inside the doorway, I watched Lu Qingheng's back and smiled. Good. She no longer needed me to speak for her. Only then did I step outside. The women changed their manner the instant they saw me. "Mission, we were only exchanging a little neighborhood gossip. Please do not take offense." "Who paid you?" I asked. Their eyes darted about. "No one paid us." Fu Shuang produced a written agreement. "Then what is this?" The document stated plainly that Liu Zhiwei had hired Madame Wang and several others to spread accusations against the Women's Academy outside the Shen family's secondary residence. Each woman was to receive 100 copper coins per day, with an additional reward if the plan succeeded. More onlookers gradually gathered. The women panicked. One dropped to her knees. "Please forgive us, Miss Shen. A trusted servant close to Miss Liu gave us the money. She said that if we ruined the academy's reputation, she would arrange positions for members of our families." A suddenly stepped outside. She was still holding her brush. Her eyes were red, but she did not cry. "Why does she always have to destroy other women's reputations?" No one answered. Because the answer was painfully simple. Liu Zhiwei had stolen so much herself that she could not bear to see others rise through genuine ability. I looked at the hired gossips. My voice was not loud, but everyone nearby could hear it clearly. "Go back and tell Liu Zhiwei that she may insult me, and I will listen. She may try to ruin Mingshan Hall, and I will be waiting. But if she again uses these women's honor as a weapon, I will have the Jingzhou prefecture invite her to explain herself in person." The women fled in disarray. That minor disturbance should have ended there. But the following day, an even more dangerous rumor spread through the capital. People claimed that women were gathering at the Shen family's secondary residence under the pretense of copying books, while secretly discussing court affairs. They accused me of using my broken engagement to win popular support and of imitating my father by establishing a separate circle of female disciples. They further claimed that Lu Qingheng, Ali Sunyang, and the others had been raised by the Shen family as witnesses, prepared to frame Liu Zhiwei and the Marquis household. By the third day, an elderly scholar publicly circulated an essay declaring that ignorance was a woman's virtue, and that allowing a Shen daughter to open an academy was the beginning of disorder within families and an omen of chaos in the realm. When those words reached the Shen residence, father was drinking tea after listening. He remained silent for a moment. I expected him to be angry, but instead he smiled. At last they have come. I smiled too. Yes, at last. Liu Zhiwei could not have written an argument like that. And the Jing'an Marquis household did not have the courage to connect women's education with rebellion against the state. Only the people behind the third prince, those who wanted to drag the Shen family back into factional conflict, would make such a charge. Father set down his teacup and looked at me. Mingtang, tomorrow there will be a literary gathering in the southern part of the capital. You will attend with me. Mother was startled. A woman attending a gathering of male scholars? They are debating the academy my daughter opened, father said calmly. Since she is the person under discussion, she should hear their words with her own ears. They should also see with their own eyes the woman they are condemning. I looked at him. In my previous life, he had taught me to remain within proper bounds, avoid suspicion, and never argue with outsiders. In this life, he personally pushed open the door and told me to go. I rose and bowed. I will go. That night I did not sleep. I sat inside Mingshan Hall and organized Lu Qingheng's poetry manuscripts, Ali's embroidery designs, Sunyang's account records, and the written statements several women had prepared in their own hands. Lu Qingheng remained with me until midnight. Then, she suddenly asked, "Are you afraid?" I smiled. "I am." She looked surprised. "I am afraid of losing," I continued. "I am afraid of implicating the Shen family. Most of all, I am afraid that these women have only just found the courage to raise their heads, only to have them forced down again." "Then why are you still going?" I looked through the window. Moonlight shone cold and bright upon the signboard over Mingshan Hall's entrance. "Because they are all watching me." The next day, when father and I arrived at the South City Literary Gathering, the pavilion was already filled with scholars. Some frowned when they saw me enter, some sneered. Others turned their heads away, as though looking at me would stain the dignity of learned men. Father did not send me behind a screen. He seated me beside him. A white-bearded elderly scholar spoke first. "Grand Tutor Shen, it is improper for a woman to attend a literary gathering. Today's discussion concerns the academy opened by my daughter," father replied. "Since she is the subject of your debate, why should she be forbidden from sitting here?" The old scholar was momentarily silenced. Then he turned to me. "Shen, tell me, why should women study?" I rose. "To understand reason, to establish themselves, and to keep others from mistreating them at will." He laughed coldly. "A woman establishes herself by relying on her father, brothers, husband, and husband's family. If every woman became as unwilling as you are to remain within the inner household, would that not overturn the proper order? If fathers, brothers, husbands, and in-laws were all reliable," I answered evenly, "why did Liu Zhiwei steal the poetry of scholar Lu Wenzhao? Why was Ali's embroidery stolen? Why was Sunyang nearly silenced because she understood the Liu family's old accounts?" The pavilion went quiet. I laid out 3 items: reviving manuscript, plum blossom embroidery design, and Sunyang's organized extracts from the Liu family's old ledgers. "Honored scholars, you say ignorance is a woman's virtue. Yet scholar Liu possessed talent, and after her death, her manuscripts were nearly stolen. Possessed skill, and another person seized her designs to win public praise. Sunyang understood accounts, and for that reason she recognized proof of the Liu family's embezzlement. If they had possessed no ability, they could only have remained silent after being mistreated. If such silence is what you call virtue, then that virtue is far too convenient for wrongdoers." Several faces in the pavilion changed. The white-bearded scholar tried again. "But educating women does not guarantee that every woman will use her learning for good." I nodded. "Correct. Liu Zhiwei is also educated, and she did not use her learning for good." Everyone stared. "That is why the question has never been whether women should study. The question is whether a person's heart is upright. An educated man may become a worthy minister, or he may become a corrupt official. An educated woman may understand reason and establish herself, or she may use her knowledge to harm others. If Liu Zhiwei's wrongdoing means that no woman in the realm should study, then because some male officials take bribes and exploit the people, are you also willing to close every academy for men?" The pavilion fell completely silent. Father lowered his eyes to drink his tea, but the corners of his mouth lifted slightly. The gathering lasted from the afternoon until dusk. I did not win everyone's agreement. Some still believed women should not leave their homes, seek recognition, or stand before the public. Yet some began to remain silent. Silence was the first crack. As we were leaving, a young scholar hurried after me and bowed. "Miss Shin, my mother learned to read when she was young. Later my grandfather said that study was useless for a woman and burned her books. Only after hearing you today did I understand why she often stared at our study in silence. He hesitated before continuing, should Mingxin Hall accept students, I would like to send my younger sister there. I returned his bow solemnly. Mingxin Hall will welcome her on the carriage ride back to the Shen residence. Father suddenly said, you spoke very well today. I smiled. Father, do you not think I showed too sharp an edge? He looked out through the carriage curtain at the evening settling over the capital. A blade that is never used will rust. An edge that remains hidden cannot protect anyone. I lowered my eyes. In this life I no longer had to grind myself into a piece of gentle harmless jade. I could be a blade and I could also be a lamp. What I had not expected was that after the literary gathering, the palace would be the first to send someone. The visitor was a female palace official, serving the empress. She did not wear formal court dress, only a plain long robe. Standing before Mingxin Hall, she smiled faintly at me. Mingxin, Her Majesty heard what happened at the South City literary gathering and sent me to see the academy. I was startled, for only a moment before understanding the empress had noticed Mingxin Hall. That was encouraging, but it was also dangerous. If the third prince intended to act during a palace banquet, he would certainly try to drag both me and Mingxin Hall into scandal before the empress openly expressed her support. Before leaving, the female palace official requested one of Ali's embroidery designs. She borrowed a copy of the Reflections collection from Liu Qingheng and listened as Sunyang explained the Liu family's old accounts. She made no promises. She merely conveyed the empress's words. If a woman can understand her own heart, she should not be buried beneath gossip. I bowed deeply. Please convey my thanks to Her Majesty. After seeing the female palace official off, I looked toward the imperial city. The wind had already reached the palace. Liu Zhiwei and the third prince would soon grow anxious. The empress's invitation arrived at the Shen residence only 3 days after the literary gathering. Its wording was gentle. It stated merely that a small flower viewing banquet would be held at Changshan Palace and invited several noblewomen to attend. But I knew it would not be merely a flower viewing banquet. Mother held the invitation with a deeply furrowed brow. Mingtang, the empress has already sent a female palace official to Mingxin Hall. Her invitation may not be a bad thing, but palace rules are strict. If someone lays a trap for you inside, we will be too far away to intervene. Father added, the third prince is already under scrutiny at court. If he still intends to recover his position, he may risk everything on one final move. My brother looked at me. You could claim illness and decline. I shook my head. Refusing would surrender the entire conversation inside the palace to them. Even if I do not attend, Liu Zhiwei she will cry and kneel and portray herself as an orphan persecuted by the Shen family. The third prince's people will use the opportunity to claim that Mingxin Hall is proof that our family is forming a private faction. Besides, the empress sent a female palace official here. That means she is willing to give me a place to speak. I cannot waste that opportunity. I will go, I said, and I will take Liu Qingheng with me. Mother was startled. Miss Liu is not a member of an official family. She is scholar Liu Wenjiao's daughter and she possesses the original manuscript of the Reflections collection. Since the empress has seen the copy, she will surely be willing to receive her. I paused. Sunyang cannot attend the banquet directly, but we must bring the embroidery design and the ledgers. Should the palace require witnesses, the empress can summon them. My brother said, I will prepare sealed copies of every statement we have obtained from Chuntao, servant Liu, and the other people connected to the case. Father added, I will also organize the evidence concerning the blue pattern stationery and Wenheng's distinctive paper folding method. Mother personally prepared the dress, sachet, and other belongings I would take into the palace, watching each member of my family make preparations on my behalf. I suddenly felt completely steady in my previous life. Entering the palace had always felt like walking alone into bottomless water. In this life, the entire Shen family stood behind me. The night before the banquet, I took out the heart-revealing jade. Its faint red pattern was barely visible in the candlelight. Fushuang asked, My lady, will you still take it this time? I nodded. Yes. What will you do if it does not respond? I smiled. Then I will not use it. She looked surprised. I slipped the jade into my sleeve. The heart-revealing jade could expose only a fleeting malicious thought. It could not reveal an entire truth. What truly determined guilt or innocence was evidence in my previous life. I had learned how to use it only at the moment of my death. In this life, I refused to become someone who could win only by relying on a supernatural object. The following day, Liu Qingheng sat beside me in the carriage, holding the manuscript case against her chest. She wore a blue-green robe and only one plain silver hairpin. Compared with the richly dressed noblewomen of the capital, she looked exceedingly austere but also exceptionally clear-eyed. As the carriage approached the palace gate, she suddenly asked, "Shen Mingtong, what if we lose today?" I looked at her. "We will not lose." She raised an eyebrow. I added, "And even if we do, we will not lose on our knees." She smiled. It was the first time I had seen Liu Qingheng smile like that. The flowers in the rear garden of Changchun Palace were in full bloom. The Marchioness of Jinghan had already arrived when we entered. Her expression soured at the sight of me, though she continued to maintain the dignity expected of a noblewoman. Liu Zhiwei stood behind her. Only a few days had passed, yet Liu seemed to have suffered greatly. Her face was pale, and there was an almost feverish light in her eyes. She still wore plain clothing and maintained her delicate, pitiable appearance. But many people in the capital now knew about the stolen poems, the stolen embroidery designs, and the scheme against the Shin family. Her tears no longer won sympathy as easily as before. When the Empress arrived, everyone bowed. Her Majesty first addressed Liu Qingheng. "Are you the daughter of scholar Lu Wenzhao?" Liu Qingheng stepped forward, knelt, and presented the Reflections collection. The Empress turned several pages and sighed softly. "Excellent writing." Those 3 words made Liu Zhiwei even paler. The Empress had publicly acknowledged Lu Wenzhao's talent, indirectly confirming the disgrace of Liu Zhiwei's literary theft. As expected, a noblewoman seated near the Marchioness immediately spoke. "Your Majesty is compassionate. However, I have heard that many of the women sheltered at Mission's Mingxin Hall have damaged reputations. A woman's honor is precious. If so many women of questionable reputation gather together to trade accusations and gossip, might that not harm public morals?" I looked at her, so it had begun. I did not defend myself immediately. I merely asked, "My lady, what exactly do you mean by damaged reputations?" She faltered. "Do you mean that Miss Liu had no place to seek justice after her mother's manuscripts were stolen? Do you mean that the embroiderer Li had her design taken, and was then falsely accused of theft? Or do you mean that Sun was nearly sold away and silenced, because she knew of the Liu family's embezzlement?" The noblewoman's expression darkened. Liu Zhiwei suddenly fell to her knees. "Your Majesty, I do not dare defend myself, but elder sister Shen repeatedly uses these people to testify against me. Is that truly unrelated to her resentment over the broken engagement?" She wept pitifully. "I admit that because I was orphaned, and without protection, I sometimes acted without sufficient care, but I never intended to take anyone's life. Elder sister Shen now gathers these women and repeatedly claims that she is seeking justice for them. Yet who can say that she is not using them to win support for the Shin family?" At last, she had voiced what the Third Prince's faction truly wanted, said Mingxin Halls was not an academy, they claimed. It was another network of Shin family disciples. That was the real accusation. The Empress' expression did not change. She looked at me. "Shin Mingtong, what is your answer?" I rose and knelt. "Your Majesty, today I do not wish to rely on words alone." "What do you wish to rely on?" "Evidence. Craftsmanship. Writing and the women's own voices." I lifted my head. "I humbly ask your Majesty to summon Ali and Sunyang." A murmur spread through the garden. Had the female palace official sent by the Empress not visited Mingxin Hall earlier, my request would have seemed abrupt and improper, but Her Majesty had already seen their material evidence, so she did not consider it absurd. After only a moment's silence, the Empress ordered, "Summon them." Liu Zhiwei's expression changed sharply. Before long, palace attendants escorted Ali and Sunyang into the rear garden. It was Ali's first time entering the palace and her legs trembled. Yet she held the plum blossom embroidery tightly against her chest. Sunyang knelt with her back straight, the account book raised in both hands. I did not speak for them, I merely stood nearby. Ali spoke first. Her voice shook, but she pronounced every word clearly. "Your Majesty, I embroidered this plum blossom design myself. Miss Liu purchased it for 10 taels of silver and said that it was for her private use. Only later did I learn that she had presented it to Commandery Princess Amping and claimed to have embroidered it herself. When I questioned her, her servants accused me of stealing an embroidery belonging to a noble lady." She turned the piece over and pointed to a nearly invisible stitch on the back. "This is the hidden stitch mark my mother taught me when I was young. Should your Majesty doubt me, I can reproduce it here." After examining the piece, the female palace official said quietly, "There is indeed a concealed mark." Sunyang then began. "I once worked in the Liu household. Miss Liu was not unaware that Liu Zheng embezzled disaster relief funds. The Liu family kept 3 sets of false accounts involving bridge repairs, grain taxes, and relief silver. I once organized those ledgers, so I remember them." She presented the extracts she had prepared. The quantities and dates recorded here can be matched against the Ministry of Justice files. Those words carried more force than any tearful accusation. The Empress looked toward Liu Zhiwei, whose face had lost all color. I drew out the blue pattern stationery, Chintao's statement, servant Liu's confession, and the clues concerning the prohibited drug that my brother had organized. Your Majesty, Liu Zhiwei did not act alone. These matters involve Wenheng, an advisor attached to the third prince's residence. The recent forged student register case and the attempt to frame the Shen family for my brother's ambush both contain traces of the same blue pattern paper and silver from the Marquis household. I would not dare accuse an imperial prince without an investigation. I ask only that Your Majesty determine whether these pieces of evidence originate from the same network. The Empress accepted the documents. Her expression grew colder with each page. Liu Zhiwei suddenly screamed, "Shen Mingtang, be silent." The entire garden was stunned. Realizing that she had lost control, immediately lowered her head and began crying again. Your Majesty, I am only afraid. Elder Sister Shen has driven me into a corner. I am truly terrified. I looked at her. You are not afraid of me, she stiffened. You are afraid because the people you trampled can finally speak. She raised her head. The hatred in her eyes was unmistakable. At that moment, I saw her gaze flick toward a cup of tea beside the Empress. A memory from my previous life struck me with terrifying clarity. Tea. Poison tea. I stepped forward at once. Your Majesty, I have one more item to present. Using the act of presenting the item as cover, I placed myself between the Empress and the cup. At the same time, I brought the heart-revealing jade inside my sleeve closer to Liu Zhiwei. I pressed my fingers against the jade and whispered the incantation. The heart conceals nothing. Hidden thoughts reveal themselves. The jade suddenly grew hot. In the next instant, Liu Zhiwei's inner voice rang clearly through the rear garden. She cannot be allowed to continue. Once the Empress drinks that tea and they find poison inside Shen Mingtang's sachet, the Shen family will be finished. His Highness the Third Prince promised that once the Shen family falls I can still recover everything. The garden fell deathly silent. Liu Zhiwei's tears froze on her face. The Empress immediately looked at the cup. An imperial physician was summoned. He tested the tea with a silver needle which darkened. Your Majesty, the tea contains poison. Liu Zhiwei collapsed to the ground. I remained where I stood, my palms icy. At last it had come. The poisonous scheme that had consumed the Shen family in my previous life had finally exposed itself before everyone. The rear garden of Changchun Palace erupted into confusion. The Empress's face was cold as frost. She ordered the palace gate sealed and none of the banquet guests were permitted to leave. Palace attendants restrained Liu Zhiwei. She continued crying out. It was not me, that was not my inner voice. Someone is framing me. But this time no one believed her easily. Because the tea truly contained poison, I was taken to a side hall. Outside, the hurried footsteps of palace attendants struck against my heart like a drum. Fu Shuang stood behind me, her face pale. My lady, had you been one step slower? One step slower and the trap from my previous life would have happened again, I said softly. Fu Shuang did not understand. She assumed I meant the events in my dream. Then she reached into her sleeve and suddenly froze. My lady, I looked at her. Her voice trembled. The sachet is gone. I was not surprised. Before entering the palace, I had deliberately instructed Fu Shuang to carry a sachet filled with mother's usual calming incense. Its fragrance was mild, and every medicinal ingredient was registered in the Shen household pharmacy. I had known someone would steal it in my previous life. The discovery of supposed poison inside my sachet had established the charge that the Shen family had attempted to harm the Empress. In this life, I allowed them to take it. I wanted to see where the hand behind the scheme would place it. I addressed the senior attendant guarding the door. Please inform Her Majesty that my sachet has been stolen. Before long, I was taken to the main hall. Liu Zhiwei knelt inside with her hair disordered, yet a trace of frantic expectation still shone in her eyes. She was waiting for my sachet to be found. Sure enough, a female palace official soon reported, Your Majesty, a sachet was discovered inside a hidden layer of the manuscript case presented by Miss Liu. Lu Qingheng's face changed. Ali and Suning were so frightened that they knelt at once. The attendant presented the sachet. When it was opened, a small packet of poison powder was found inside. The imperial physician examined it gravely. Your Majesty, its properties are similar to the poison in the tea. Liu Zhiwei immediately raised her head. Your Majesty, look! The poison was found in the manuscript case, brought by Elder Sister Shen's people. They clearly arranged all of this to frame me. The Marchioness hurriedly agreed. Your Majesty, Miss Shen came exceptionally well prepared today. It is difficult to believe that she knew nothing. I did not rush to respond. At such a moment, haste would only create an opening. I bowed to the Empress. Your Majesty, I ask that 3 matters be investigated. The Empress looked at me. Speak. First, determine who approached Fushuang today. Second, examine whether the sachet bears traces of powder or rouge belonging to anyone other than Fushuang. Third, inspect the way the paper packet containing the poison was folded. The folding? The Empress repeated. Wenheng of the third prince's residence often folds secret letters and medicine packets with a triangular tuck, then turns the final half-inch backward. During the forged student register case, my brother submitted a torn piece of Wenheng's blue-patterned stationery folded in the same manner. A female palace official immediately unfolded the poison packet. Its final half-inch had indeed been turned backward. The Empress's expression grew even colder. Investigate. It did not take long for the palace maid who had bumped into Fushuang while carrying flowers to be brought forward. Lu Qingheng recognized her at once. It was her. The maid initially denied everything. Then the female palace officials searched her quarters and found a silver ingot bearing a concealed mark from the third prince's residence. She immediately lost her composure. I only accepted money to perform a task. Someone ordered me to bump into that young woman, steal the sachet and place it inside Miss Lu's manuscript case. I did not know there was poison inside. Who gave you the order? The Empress asked. The maid cried. Qingxing, Miss Liu's personal attendant. Liu Zhiwei screamed. You are lying, but Qingxing was quickly brought into the hall as well. She was already trembling uncontrollably when she entered. The moment she saw Liu Zhiwei, she lunged toward her. Young lady, save me, you said the third prince would protect us. The hall went silent. Liu Zhiwei raised a hand as though to strike her, but the palace attendants restrained her. Qingxing sobbed. I will not hide anything again. The young lady ordered it all. Master Wen supplied the blue-patterned stationery, and Master Wen supplied the poison. The young lady said that once the Empress was poisoned and poison was found in the manuscript case brought by Miss Shen, the Shen family would be completely destroyed. The Empress's gaze was sharp. By Master Wen, do you mean Wenheng? Qingxing nodded frantically. Liu Zhiwei finally sank completely to the floor. No trace of pretense remained in Liu Zhiwei's eyes, there was only fear. I looked at her, but I felt no urge to laugh in triumph. In my previous life, false evidence had crushed the Shen family layer by layer. Poison powder, a sachet, a teacup, witnesses, and rumors. Everything had been made to appear real. A woman's innocence and a family's integrity could be dragged through the mud simply because someone arranged a few convincing objects in this life. I had finally dismantled those objects, one by one, before everyone's eyes. It was not that I had become more ruthless. I had finally understood that when people used fabricated evidence as a weapon, the only defense was to move before them and prepare a more complete chain of proof. The Empress ordered the poisoned tea, the sachet, the marked silver ingot, and Qingxing's testimony sealed as evidence. She then sent a palace eunuch to invite the Emperor. While we waited, Liu Zhiwei suddenly looked up at me. Xinming Tang, did you know from the beginning? Her voice was hoarse, and terror close to collapse filled her eyes. From the day I asked to become your father's disciple, you seemed like another person. You knew what I intended to do. You knew whom I would approach. You even knew how I would retaliate. I did not answer. Yet she seemed to reach a conclusion of her own and suddenly laughed. You had a dream too, did you not? The female palace officials in the chamber frowned, assuming she had lost her mind. But Liu Zhiwei stared fixedly at me. You dreamed that I won. You dreamed that your father was exiled. Your brother died, and you were confined in the Marquis Manor's cold courtyard. Is that not true? Fu Hong's expression changed sharply. The heart-revealing jade inside my sleeve warmed slightly, but I did not use it at once. I simply walked toward Liu Zhiwei. Even if I knew, would that make you innocent? Her laughter stopped. Knowing is one matter. Choosing what to do is another. Given another life, you still stole poems, stole another woman's reputation, poisoned innocent people and climbed by stepping on others. Given another's life, I chose to stop you. The smile on her face slowly broke apart. By the time the Emperor arrived, the tables was covered with evidence. The Empress reported the entire sequence of events. The Emperor was advanced in years, but his gaze remained heavy and sharp. He examined the poisoned tea, the marked silver, and Qingxing's confession before finally looking at Liu Zhiwei. Liu Zhiwei, what else do you have to say? She threw herself forward. Your Majesty, spare me. I only followed orders. It was Wenheng. He forced me to do everything. If I refused, the third prince would never have spared me. Even the Marchioness closed her eyes. Liu Zhiwei had finally dragged the third prince into the case with her own words. The Emperor's expression turned completely cold. Arrest Wenheng. Seal the third prince's residence. The orders were brief, but they fell like a hammer. I knelt on the palace floor, my palms against the cold tiles. After the palace banquet in my previous life, the Shen family had been investigated. After this banquet, it was the third prince's residence that would be searched. At last, fate had changed direction. Before leaving, the emperor looked at me. You are Shen Huaijin's daughter? I am Shen Mingtang. You possess considerable courage, I bowed. I was afraid for too long. I cannot afford to be afraid anymore. The hall was silent for a moment. The emperor said nothing more to me. He merely told the empress, handle the matter of Mingxin Hall as you see fit. At those words, I knew the academy had gained a genuine path forward. It was late at night when we left the palace. The Sashin family carriage waited outside the gates. Father, mother, and my brother were all there. The moment mother saw me, she took my hand. Her palm was warm. Let us go home. I nodded. All right. As the carriage departed, I glanced toward the third prince's residence. Its grounds were brightly lit, and soldiers could be seen moving in the distance. I lowered the curtain. The mountain that had once pressed upon the Shane family had finally collapsed. This time, it had fallen upon the people who created it. On the third day after the third prince's residence was sealed, Wen Heng was imprisoned. From a hidden compartment in his study, the Court of Judicial Review recovered blue-patterned stationery, remnants of poisoned packets, drafts of the forged student register, and secret correspondence between him and Liu Zhiwei. The letters were explicit. Liu Zhiwei had offered to approach the Shen family on the third prince's behalf, gain admission as father's disciple, and steal Shen family manuscripts and the student register. In exchange, she asked the third prince to clear the Li family's old case and restore her standing in the capital as the Grand Tutor's distinguished student. My brother brought one letter for me to read. One line stated, Shen Mingting has withdrawn from the engagement and her temperament has changed greatly. Unless she is removed soon, she will become a lasting threat. Looking at those words, I suddenly laughed. In their eyes, I was no longer the obedient noblewoman who could be crushed without consequence. I was a lasting threat. Strangely, those words pleased me. The third prince was confined and Wen Heng remained in custody pending judgment. Censor Qian and other officials implicated in the faction were dismissed and investigated. The accounting staff of the Jing'an Marquis Manor were also taken away for questioning. When Xiao Jing'an was summoned by the Court of Judicial Review, he reportedly still tried to defend Liu Zhiwei, claiming that she was an unprotected orphan acting under coercion. But when the investigators placed her secret letters before him, he finally fell silent. In those letters, Liu Zhiwei called him someone in the Xiao family she could use. Not Brother Jing'an, not an old source of protection, a person who could be used. When my brother told me this, there was coldness in his voice. His face changed immediately. I felt no satisfaction, only irony. Xiao Jing'an did not truly see Liu Zhiwei until he discovered that she had used him as well. Yet, in my previous life, he had failed to see the harm she inflicted upon me for all those years. That evening, the Empress summoned me to the palace again. This time I was not taken to the main hall of Changchun Palace, but to a side chamber where Liu Zhiwei was being held. When a female palace official led me inside, Li sat on the floor with disordered hair and an ashen face. She straightened slightly when she saw me, then laughed. You came. I remained beside the door and did not approach. She stared at me. Shen Mingtang, are you proud of yourself? No. Her laugh grew harsher. Why pretend you won? The Shen family did not fall. Your father was not exiled. Your brother did not die. Even that miserable academy of yours is about to receive an imperial signboard. I looked at her, so she truly remembered. She remembered our previous lives and she remembered everything she had done. Then you were reborn as well, I said softly. Her eyes changed. After a moment she gritted her teeth. So what if I was? The female palace officials in the chamber did not understand our words and merely watched her warily. Liu Zhiwei braced herself against the floor and moved forward. Why? Why were you able to save everyone after returning, while I returned too and still lost? I found the question absurd. She knew the consequences of her previous choices, yet she had still chosen to walk the same road. Liu Zhiwei, after returning, did you ever consider changing? She froze. You could have abandoned the plan to become my father's disciple. You could have refused to steal poems. You could have stayed away from the third prince. You could have left the capital and begun again. What did you choose instead? Anger surged in her eyes. Of course it is easy for you to say. You are the legitimate daughter of the Grand Tutor's household. You were born with everything. What I was born with was the integrity protected by generations of the Shen family. It was not something you became entitled to because you cried for it. Her voice sharpened. And what of me? My father failed and the Liu family was ruined. If I did not fight for myself, how was I supposed to live? Lu Qingheng lost her mother. Whose work did she steal? Ali was slandered. Whom did she harm? Sun Yang escaped from the Liu household. Whom did she poison? I questioned her one step at a time. It was not that you had no honest road, you simply despised roads that required honest effort. Liu Ji lunged toward me, but the female palace officials restrained her. As her sleeve shifted, an old scar on her wrist became visible. She began laughing through her tears. An honest road? Such roads are meant for people like you, people with families behind them. I had no one. I had to find protection for myself. So you sought my father, Xiao Jing'an, the marquis household, and the third prince. I looked down at her, but every source of protection you sought was not meant to shelter you from hardship. You wanted to stand above others and crush them. Her face turned white. I took the heart-revealing jade from my sleeve. Previously, I had always concealed it while using it. This time I placed it directly before her. A female palace official looked startled. Miss Shen, what is this? An old object belonging to the Shen family. Liu Zhiwei knows it. The moment Liu saw the jade, her entire body stiffened. I looked at her and recited the incantation clearly. The heart conceals nothing. Hidden thoughts reveal themselves. A faint red light appeared inside the jade. Liu Zhiwei screamed, "No, take it away!" But it was already too late. The resentment and unwillingness she had buried deepest inside herself rang through the chamber sentence by sentence. Why was she allowed to return? In the previous life, I was the one who won. I became Xin Huaijin's disciple and took the Xin family's manuscripts. I used Xiao Jing'an to enter the marquis household and leaked the student register to the third prince. Xin Huaijin was exiled. Xin Yanxi died. Xin Mingtong's mother died of illness, and Xin Mingtong was locked in the cold courtyard. I delivered the poisoned wine. Xiao Jing'an knew and allowed it. He feared that if Xin Mingtong remained alive, the Xin family might rescue her and overturn the case. The female palace official's expressions changed sharply. I stood motionless, as though an icy hand had closed around my heart. At last I had heard the complete truth about the poisoned wine from my previous life. Liu Zhiwei's thoughts continued, but I still was not satisfied. I hated being only a concubine in the marquis household. I hated that the third prince treated me merely as a pawn. I hated that Xiao Jing'an sometimes still remembered Shen Mingtong. She was already dead. Why did she still stand above me? The jade's light slowly faded. The side chamber was silent. Liu Zhiwei lay on the floor as though all her strength had left her. I looked at her. Even after the Shen family was destroyed, and I was gone, she had never been satisfied. A person like her would never be satisfied. Give her a road, and she would complain that it was too narrow. Give her a mansion, and she would complain that it was not grand enough. Give her a life, and she would resent anyone whose life seemed better. The female palace officials immediately recorded everything they had heard. Only then did Liu Zhiwei react. She shook her head wildly. No, those were not my words. Shen Mingtong, you are framing me! I put away the jade. You framed yourself. She continued crying as the female palace officials took her away. When I left the side chamber, daylight reflected from the palace wall, painfully bright. I steadied myself against a corridor pillar and slowly drew a breath. Fu Shuang's eyes were red. My lady Xiao Jing'an, actually. There is no need to speak of him, I interrupted. To me, he is now only one entry in an old case. That same night, Xiao Jing'an was interrogated again by the Court of Judicial Review. No court could judge him for the poisoned wine of a previous life. But in this life, evidence proved that he had sheltered Liu Zhiwei, transferred money for her, and allowed servants from the marquis household to steal handkerchiefs for the framing scheme. That was enough. Liu Zhiwei was sentenced to exile 3,000 li from the capital, and forbidden to return for the rest of her life. Wen Heng was sentenced to immediate execution. The third prince was confined under the authority of the imperial clan court, ending his path to the throne. Censor Qian and the other implicated officials were dismissed and prosecuted. To protect itself, the Jing'an marquis household submitted a memorial admitting fault and requested that Xiao Jing'an be stripped of his position as heir. The marquise fainted when she heard the judgments. But that did not end the consequences. Father did not plead for the marquis household, nor did my brother for years. The Xiao family had used the Shen family's reputation to climb higher. Then it had allowed Xiao Jing'an and Liu Zhiwei to direct scandal toward us. The collapse of its support was only the result it had earned. 3 days later, the marquis household was fined. Xiao Jing'an lost his position as heir and was exiled 2,000 away. The noble title passed to a collateral branch, and the marchioness had to sell part of her dowry to pay the penalties. The Jing'an marquis manor, once surrounded by carriages and visitors, became deserted almost overnight. Everyone in the capital said that Liu Zhiwei had destroyed the Xiao family. When I heard that, I merely said no. Fu Shuang asked, "You do not think so, my lady?" I looked through the window at the newly flowering crabapple tree. Liu Zhiwei merely tore open the greed that was already inside them and exposed it for everyone to see. If a person has no desire to take what belongs to others, no amount of temptation can make that person join the wrongdoing. A tree with sound roots will not fall merely because the wind outside blows crookedly. The Marquis household has only itself to blame for reaching this point, and I no longer needed to waste even a fraction of my attention on them. Xiaojing came to kneel outside the Shen residence on a day of fine rain. The rain was not heavy, but it fell densely, much like the day Liu Zhiwei had once knelt there to beg father to accept her as a disciple. When the gatekeeper brought the message, I was at Mingxin Hall watching A Li teach a young student to embroider crabapple blossoms. A Li now spoke with much more confidence than before. Holding an embroidery frame, she told the newly arrived girl, "Do not be afraid if the stitches are wrong. Remove them and begin again. A person's life is the same. One mistaken stitch does not mean nothing can ever be corrected." I smiled when I heard her. The gatekeeper hesitated after entering. "My lady, young Master Xiao is outside. He says he wishes to see you." The room became silent. Lu Qingheng looked up at me. "Will you go?" I set down the book in my hands. "I will." There are some doors one must close with one's own hands. Outside, the fine rain covered the flagstones like the last lingering mist of an old dream. At the gates of the Shen residence, Xiao Jing'an knelt below the stone steps. The noble bearing of the former heir to a marquise had vanished. His robe was stained with mud, and his hair ornament sat crookedly. In only a few days he seemed emptied of all vitality. When he saw me, a small light appeared in his eyes. "Mingtang." I remained at the top of the steps. His face paled once he had been heir Xiao. Now he no longer held that title. He looked up at me. His voice hoarse. "I know I was wrong. In my previous life, I had waited years to hear those words. I waited through the wind and snow of the cold courtyard, until dead branches broke beneath the weight of winter. I waited until the final cup of poisoned wine, and still the words never came. Now that I heard them, they felt weightless and never reached my heart." "Where were you wrong?" I asked. He froze. Perhaps every faithless person seeking forgiveness believed that saying, "I was wrong," should be enough. But if he could not even name his wrongdoing, then in his heart someone else was still responsible. His lips trembled. "I should not have trusted Zhiwei. I should not have indulged her. I should not have allowed you to suffer." I shook my head. "That is not enough." Panic deepened in his eyes. "Mingtang, I truly did not know she would do those things. She deceived me. She said you could not tolerate her. She said she only wished to study. She told me that you had bribed every witness. I was used by her too." I looked at him as rain darkened the fabric across his shoulders. In the past, the slightest sign of distress from him would have softened me. Not anymore. "Xiao Jing'an, why was she able to use you?" He stared at me. "Because you already wanted to protect her. When she cried, you believed her. Because you already believed I should be generous. Whenever she claimed to be wronged, you blamed me. Because you wanted the Shin family's support but could not bear to lose her dependence on you, you refused to release either side." His face grew whiter with every sentence. "You did not harm Selmi simply because she deceived you," I said quietly. "You are here now only because you finally discovered that I was not the only person she deceived." He swayed as though struck by the truth. "Mingtang, give me one more chance." I said nothing. He moved forward on his knees, his voice breaking. "The Marquis household has abandoned me. I have nothing left. I can leave the capital. I can change. I can spend the rest of my life making amends. As long as you are willing to forgive me," I interrupted him. "Xiao Jing'an, in my previous life, I waited for you to turn back. What came instead was a cup of poisoned wine." He jerked his head up. "There is no need to ask." I looked at him and finally released the last remnant of my old attachment. "Whether you knew then no longer matters. What matters is that I am no longer waiting." Something in his eyes shattered completely. I turned toward the gatekeeper. "If young Master Xiao comes again, there is no need to report it." Behind me, Xiao Jing'an called my name in a broken voice. "Mingtang!" I paused, but I did not look back. "Xiao Jing'an, you no longer have any hold over my life." The gates of the Shen residence slowly closed behind me. Their heavy sound seemed to shut all the wind and snow of that former cold courtyard outside forever. I did not go to watch Liu Zhiwei leave for exile. Fu Shuang asked, "My lady, do you not wish to see her humiliated?" I shook my head. "No." "Why?" "What she wanted most was my attention." I looked at the newly planted crabapple trees before Mingxin Hall. Refusing to give it to her is the best ending. Later, Lu Qingxing went to the city gate. She did not go to see Liu Zhiwei off. Instead, before the escorting officers, she burned the copied manuscripts Liu Zhiwei had once stolen from her mother. When she returned, she stood at the academy entrance and told me, "After I burned them, I suddenly felt that the burden was no longer so heavy." "That is good," I said. "Justice must be pursued, but we cannot spend our entire lives carrying the people who harmed us." 3 months later, an imperial decree formally arrived at the Shen residence. Mingshan Hall received an official plaque and was expanded into Mingshan Women's Academy. Both daughters of noble families and women from poor households were permitted to enroll. The academy established 6 fields of study: poetry and prose, arithmetic, law, medicine, accounting, and embroidery. The empress ordered a female palace official to teach there once each month. She also permitted Liu Qingheng to organize the surviving manuscripts of her mother, Liu Wenzhao, for preservation in the imperial library. On the day the plaque was bestowed, the entrance to the Shen residence was crowded. Some people who had once insulted Mingshan Hall came to watch the excitement. Some expected a spectacle. Others stood outside, holding the hands of younger sisters, daughters and girls born to secondary wives, asking whether enrollment was still possible. I refused none of them. If the doors of Mingshan Women's Academy opened only for those who had defended me, they would be far too narrow. Father stood at the entrance and watched as female palace officials raised the plaque. The 4 Chinese characters on the plaque read, "Mingshan Women's Academy." Sunlight shone across the golden lettering, bright enough to bring heat to my eyes. Father stood beside me. "Mingtang, had your grandmother lived to see this, she would have been very happy." I held the heart-revealing jade inside my sleeve. I had deliberately brought it with me that day. It had exposed Liu Zhiwei's malice and torn open the darkness of my previous life. Yet I knew that from this day forward, I should no longer depend upon it at every moment. I entered the main hall and placed the jade inside a sandalwood case on the ceremonial table. Fu Shuang asked softly, "My lady, will you no longer carry it?" I shook my head. "No." "Why?" I looked outside. Liu Qingheng was teaching the students to read the Reflections collection. Ali guided several girls through embroidery, laughing as she told them that mistaken stitches could be removed and sewn again. Sunyang sat in the accounting room, carefully checking every item of the academy's expenses. Mother was arranging clothing and bedding for a newly arrived girl, gently telling her not to be afraid. My brother stood beneath the corridor, surrounded by several bold students asking questions about the law, his usually composed face showing rare helplessness. Father stood beneath the plaque, watching another branch of learning grow from the Shen family. I smiled. From now on, the Shen family will not rely on a supernatural object to judge people's hearts. We will rely on clear eyes, upright hearts, and ourselves. Fu Shuang's eyes reddened on the academy's first day of lessons. A very young girl ran toward me, holding a book. "Teacher Shen, will I be able to become as remarkable as you one day?" I crouched and straightened the ribbon that had slipped sideways in her hair. "You do not need to become like me." She blinked. "You should become yourself." She seemed only half to understand, but she nodded solemnly and ran into the classroom with her book. Sunset filled the courtyard. I stood before Mingshan Women's Academy and watched young faces pass through its doors. Some belonged to daughters of powerful households. Others belonged to orphaned girls from poor families. Some had suffered broken engagements. Some had been falsely accused. Some could barely write their own names. Others simply wanted to know whether a woman's life held any path beyond marriage and endurance. This place gave them a desk, a lamp, and an answer. When I died in the cold courtyard of my previous life, I believed I had merely lost to Liu Zhiwei. Only after living again did I understand that she was never the true opponent I needed to defeat. I needed to overcome the rules that forced women into silence, demanded that victims prove their own innocence, and required a person to stake her entire life upon a marriage. Liu Zhiwei once asked why I could return and reclaim everything. In truth, I had stolen nothing. I had merely taken back, one by one, the things that should always have belonged to us. Father's integrity, mother's peace, my brother's life, Luanzhao's poetry, Ali's embroidery, Sunyang's testimony, and my own future. A breeze crossed the courtyard, scattering crabapple petals across the ground. I raised my eyes to the plaque of Mingshan Women's Academy, shining in the sunset. In this life, I no longer asked whom Liu Zhiwei might use as her protector. I had finally understood that I could be the Shen family's protector, and my own. Bioanuetsihat I Pate Ro, the first lesson at Mingshan Women's Academy. My brother was nearly brought to tears by the students. On the day Mingshan Women's Academy formally began classes, I assumed I would be the busiest person there. I soon discovered that I was wrong. The busiest person was my elder brother Shen Yanzi. More precisely, it was Lord Shen, surrounded by a group of young girls and left with no possible path of escape. The weather was bright that day, and crabapple blossoms crowded the trees before the academy. Lu Qingheng was teaching the reflections collection in the main hall. Ali was teaching embroidery in the western room. Sun Yang was working an abacus over the accounts in the accounting office, while Mother accompanied several newly arrived girls as they familiarized themselves with the courtyard. I had just begun to think that I might enjoy a quiet moment when my brother entered the academy in a dark teal robe. His expression solemn and correct. He had come to teach law. He had volunteered for the task himself. Several days earlier, a few students had asked me, "Teacher Shen, what should we do if someone steals something from us and then claims that we stole it from them?" I casually replied, "Next time, I will have Lord Shen explain it to you." The remark reached my brother, and he took it completely seriously. He even prepared an entire scroll of legal provisions. When I saw him enter, I could not help laughing. "Brother, you look as though you are going to court." He glanced at me. "The law must not be treated lightly," I nodded. "Of course Lord Shen is truly imposing." He frowned. "Do not tease me." Suppressing my laughter, I led him into the lecture hall. More than 20 girls were seated inside. The youngest were only 8 or 9, while the oldest were 17 or 18. They had been chatting without pause. The moment my brother entered, they all became silent. At once he stood at the front and cleared his throat. "Today I will explain the provisions in the laws of Great Yang concerning theft, false accusations, commercial deception, and forged evidence." The students nodded earnestly. My brother opened his scroll and had read only 2 lines when a girl named Xiaomen, seated in the first row, raised her hand. He paused. "Speak." Xiaomen looked at him with round, sincere eyes. "Lord Shen, suppose someone steals my pastry, and after I catch her, says that the pastry ran into her mouth by itself. Does that count as false testimony?" My brother was silent for a moment, sitting by the window with my tea. I nearly choked. He answered with complete seriousness. "A pastry cannot run by it." Xiaomen looked enlightened. "Then she was lying." "Yes, may I hit her?" "No." Xiaomen looked deeply disappointed. "Why not?" "You may report the matter to your teacher and allow the teacher to handle it," she muttered. "Teachers handle things too slowly. By then the pastry is already gone." Several girls shook with suppressed laughter. A muscle moved slightly at my brother's temple, but he maintained his solemn expression. "The law requires evidence. You may not punish someone privately." At that moment, Ali raised her hand from the back row. She was now an instructor at the academy herself, but when she heard my brother would be teaching law, she had joined the students to listen. "Miss Ali, please speak," my brother said. Ali asked with great seriousness, "If someone takes my embroidery and claims that she made it, and I slap her at once, would that count as taking punishment into my own hands?" The entire hall became silent. Everyone knew she was referring to Liu Zhiwei. My brother remained silent even longer and looked toward me. I slowly sipped my tea and pretended not to notice. Finally he coughed. "Under the law, it is not advisable to strike someone without authority." Ali blinked. "Then I will not slap her next time." My brother had just begun to relax when she added, "Would it be permitted if I ask someone else to slap her?" Someone in the hall finally burst out laughing. My brother closed his eyes briefly. "That would also be improper." Xiaomen immediately raised her hand. "Then Lord Shen, what are we supposed to do?" He drew a deep breath. "Report the matter to the authorities." Xiaomen looked even more confused. "What if the officials do not believe me?" At that question, the laughter slowly faded. My brother looked at her, and his expression became serious. "Then find evidence, physical evidence, witnesses, account books, handwriting, contracts, preserve anything that can leave a trace. If one office refuses to act, appeal to a higher office. If one person refuses to believe you, let more people hear your account." Man nodded, only partly understanding. "So we cannot merely cry?" "You may cry," my brother replied. I raised my eyes toward him. He continued, "But after crying, remember to keep the evidence safe." This time even I laughed. My brother finally gave me a helpless look. I smiled. "Lord Shen, that was the best lesson you have given today. We should write it down and hang it on the wall." Lu Qingheng immediately picked up a brush and wrote, "Aapte rasiri ionga. Ryamb ratheokaipate hati vidnc at deapi." When she finished, she asked with complete seriousness, "Should we hang it in the main hall or a side hall?" My brother's expression changed. "That was not what I meant." Xiaomen was already clapping. "The main hall? The next time someone steals my pastry, I will cry first and then preserve the evidence." My brother covered his forehead. I laughed so hard that my stomach hurt. The atmosphere in the lecture hall immediately became relaxed. My brother had prepared 3 full pages of legal provisions, but by the end of the morning, he had explained only the first one, because the students had far too many questions. Lord Shin, what should a woman do if her husband's family claims that her dowry belongs to them? Lord Shin, what should I do if someone borrows money, refuses to repay it, and then claims I never lent it? Lord Shen, what if a matchmaker deliberately says a family is immensely wealthy, but it turns out they own only 1 donkey? Does that count as deception? My brother had just taken a sip of tea. At the mention of the donkey, he nearly choked. He set down his cup and said gravely, if facts were deliberately concealed during marriage negotiations, the marriage documents may be investigated. Xiaoman raised her hand again. Then who gets the donkey? The whole room erupted in laughter. My brother stared at her. What do you mean, who gets the donkey? If the marriage is cancelled, can the deceived girl receive the donkey as compensation? She suffered a fright after all. Even the usually reserved Lu Qingheng laughed behind her book. My brother looked at me. 4 words seemed written plainly in his eyes. You explain this. I immediately lowered my head and drank my tea. I had seen nothing. When lunchtime finally arrived, my brother escaped from the lecture hall. He reached the corridor and released a long breath. I asked with a smile, Lord Shen, how did today's lesson go? He glanced at me and answered without expression, it was more exhausting than investigating the third prince's faction. I finally laughed aloud. Then, brother, will you return next month? He was silent. I deliberately added, should you refuse, I will tell Soman that Lord Shen was frightened away by a donkey. His face stiffened. When was I frightened by a donkey? Then you were frightened by Soman. He stared at me for a long moment before sighing. I will return. My eyes curved with delight. You are the best brother, he gave a dismissive sound. Do not flatter me then, he added. Next time I will not lecture from legal statutes. What will you teach? How to write a formal complaint. My eyes brightened. That is an excellent idea. Unfortunately for him, Xiaoman overheard us. She poked her head around a pillar. Lord Shin, next time may I write a complaint against the person who steals my pastries? My brother opened his mouth. Lu Qingheng said dryly, it appears the pastry case has already become the Academy's first major legal dispute. Sunyang leaned out from the accounting room. If you want to investigate the pastries, begin with today's kitchen ledger. 20 osmanthus cakes were purchased this morning and only 7 remain. Xiaoman's expression changed. She turned and ran. Fushuang immediately shouted, Xiaoman, were you the one who secretly ate them? Running away, Xiaoman called back. I did not. The pastries ran into my mouth by themselves. My brother stood in silence for a long time. Finally he said, the evidence in this case is conclusive. I laughed until I could barely stand straight. A sentence was indeed hung in the main hall of Mingxin Women's Academy. It had not been composed by father, nor bestowed by the empress. Lu Qing had written it herself. Aapde rasira the ing, rayambia beat the hati vidnc ayathepi. When father visited the academy that evening and saw it, he stood before the wall in silence for a long time. I expected him to consider it insufficiently dignified. Instead, he stroked his beard and said, it is not elegant, but it is practical. Mother laughed so hard that she could barely hold her handkerchief. My brother stood nearby with a wooden expression. I leaned closer and whispered, brother, do you regret coming? He looked into the main hall, where a group of girls had surrounded Xiaoman and were interrogating her about the missing osmanthus cakes. After a moment, the corner of his mouth lifted slightly. No. I followed his gaze. Xiaoman was holding half an osmanthus cake and declaring righteously, I was testing them for poison. For everyone's sake, Ali asked, then why did you test 13? Xiaoman considered this seriously because the poison might be hidden deep inside. The hall dissolved into laughter again. Standing beneath the corridor, I felt such warmth in my chest that it almost ached. In my previous life, the Shen residence had eventually held only winter wind and sorrow. In this life, Mingxin Women's Academy held lively chatter, laughter, a mysterious case involving missing osmanthus cakes, and a group of girls learning to speak for themselves. Living again was not only about revenge. It was also about being able to witness days like these carefree and lively. Ind moved through the crabapple tree, and petals settled upon Soman's hair. She was still defending herself. Teacher, I truly did not steal them. I was only protecting the evidence in advance. I laughed. Then where is the evidence? With an innocent expression she patted her stomach. Here, the laughter inside the hall nearly lifted the roof. I laughed with them. As I did, my eyes grew warm. This life was truly good.